RetroGaming Radio 2005. Keep it retro. Welcome to RetroGaming Radio. I'm Shane Armin, your host. RetroGaming Radio. RetroGaming Radio. Today we have another presentation of Quake 2 and
Kimberly, come in. Are you okay?
You're now listening to RetroGaming Radio. RetroGaming Radio.
And you're listening to RetroGaming Radio.
Welcome to the program. RetroGaming Radio 2005. Shane Armin, Bryan Smith behind the board. Keep it retro. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the January 2005 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. This is Shane Armin, your host, with Bryan Kid Hype Smith behind the mixing board, producing the show for you. Welcome to the new year. Welcome to 2005. I just want to take a moment to reflect before we actually get into the main content of the show. We started Retro Gaming Radio as Retro Radio. In 1998, I started alone. The show ran about once a week. It was like a 15-minute segment. I wanted like a weekly 15-minute segment to keep everybody abreast of all the new emulators that were coming out and things in the scene, and talking about how evil the IDSA was for stopping us from playing Donkey Kong on our PCs. And the show started August 28th, I think, or August 18th. Yeah, I have to look it up. In 1998. We started the show, and I started the show, and it blossomed after that. I moved into a monthly format. We experimented with video. If you've got the Year 3 archive CDs, you can look at that. You can see some of the video stuff that we had. We had screenshots. We had all sorts of really cool stuff. Back in the old days, it just took so long to produce a show that it was very exhausting to make the early editions of Retro Gaming Radio, Retro Radio, as it were. And then somewhere along the way, we had a little problem, and I'm not going to discuss it at length, but you could probably find it on our message forums if you go and check it out. We had a problem with another group of, what's a good politically correct word to say? Hate mongers that targeted our show, targeted me specifically. Stalker, fake websites, flash games, all sorts of nasty, freaky crap that this group did. And we used to use RR, Retro Radio, as sort of a little signature thing, where now it's RGR, of course. But and, of course, they had to name their copycat radio show something that also had the initials RR. So, unfortunately, we decided to make a name change to make sure that we were nowhere near associated with the Nazi group that started doing all this stuff. So we redubbed ourselves to Retro Gaming Radio, which actually made a little more sense anyway. Plus, we could get the domain. RetroRadio.com was back-ordered from here to Kingdom Come for some old radio sales site, if I remember right. Something to that effect. Anyway. So we moved on, and still Bryan wasn't with me. He was a fan, and we were good friends, but I continued to run the show until just a couple years ago. Bryan's entrance into the show was relatively new, for those of you who have not followed the archives. We stopped the show. I stopped the show for about 6-7 months. The show really wasn't going in a good direction. I was running out of time. It was a whole bunch of things. I kind of lost faith in the whole scene. The classic gaming scene was moving way downhill. The Generation Gimme kids were infiltrating because they wanted to play Area 51. I was really disappointed. And Bryan came up to me one day and he said, "Listen, I want you to bring the show back." And it's like, well, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. He says, "I'm telling you what." He says, "You like to do the interviews. You like to have that sort of stuff." I said, "Yeah, everyone loves the interviews." And he's like, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He says, "I am going to make you believe in classic gaming. I'm going to revitalize your faith in what we do and what you do." And he says, "I want to come along for the ride. I want to produce the show. I would like to be part of the Retro Gaming Radio legacy." And I said, "Okay, you prove to me that, there's still a market, that there's still people out there to cater to, that there's still hope for this. And we'll talk about bringing the show back, and you'll be on board. So Bryan took me to the Electronic Gaming Expo, E3. And the first year that I went, they hadn't quite blocked everything off from the general users yet. In the subsequent years after that, if you didn't have a press badge, or you didn't have some special VIP pass, you didn't get any T-shirts, you didn't even get to get your hands on the hardware, really. The Sega booth was closed to everybody. It was overall a very interesting transition to be part of the E3 experience for those couple, 2-3 years. But we went to E3 and it's like, wow. So there's this huge gaming thing, right? And, there was the Nintendos. They were showing off, I think, the Game Boy Advances back then with the, conveniently placed spotlight above your head where you couldn't see. There were Pokemons. I think that was the year that they filled up a bug full of Pokemons. And you had to guess how many Pokemons there were in there. Something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, but, that whole time your mouth is just hanging open going, wow, this is alive. But then, I looked around and here's, the PlayStation stuff and the Nintendo stuff. And it's like there wasn't any heart in it for me. And Bryan says, let's go downstairs. So we went down to the Ghetto, Kenesha Hall, which if you've been to E3, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've got all these multi-billion-dollar booths at E3 in the main hall. You look at like Square's booth, and they've got these disjointed heads floating around up above on these lanyards and on these, it's crazy if you've ever been there. And then you go down to basically what turns into be a gaming flea market. That's the best way I can explain it. We went down there, and I got to meet the folks at Digital Leisure, right? I got to see what the independents were doing, what the little people were doing, the people that I'd kind of started the show for and about. There are people down there with very new and innovative things. I was like, wow. Okay, so we've got this huge giant world up here that's filled with all the bells and whistles and the Me Too crap, but down here in the same show, we've got something real. We've got something innovative. We've got things that are still moving. And I was like, okay, well that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Then we went to the Classic Gaming Expo just to visit. We weren't there officially. We went to visit, and once I went into Classic Gaming Expo 2001 maybe, I think it was. I don't have a good mind for years or dates, but we went there, and it's like I was totally sold. You have the museum. We've covered the Classic Gaming Expo in the past a lot, but you go in there and it's like, oh my God, I'm home. My people. I have found my people, my Mecca. It is here. And at that point in time, I said to Bryan, okay, we're going to bring it back. And Bryan started busting ass to get us interviews, and he really went the distance. And I know I didn't really mean for this retrospective look to center on Bryan, but Bryan's really the reason why we're still here, why you're listening to his show. I couldn't do this show anymore without him. If he decided to up and stop producing the show, I probably wouldn't do the show. I could do it on my own. I wouldn't want to. We took a paradigm shift. The show started off very grungy in the early years. And there was a definite appeal to that. But if you don't hate somebody, if there's not somebody in your target to hate every single week, it's really hard to make that grunge thing stick. It's interesting. It's interesting to go back and listen to the old shows. But unless you're hating everything, it's really hard. It's hard to make a show about love. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot easier to make a show about hate. So the early shows were about hatred and anger and frustration and these emerging things. When we all used to sit up at midnight on a certain day waiting for MAME to get released. They were completely different days than now. It's very different. But it's not necessarily worse, depending on how you look at it. Bryan's really responsible for the new format. He's responsible for bringing some style back to the show. He keeps me directed. That particular period of time was a big transition for us. And it was either going to work or it didn't. And it worked. The interviews turned out to be totally better than I could have ever imagined it. I still listen to the David Crane piece because, he's kind of the epitome of one of our best interviews. He spent forever talking to us. He wasn't afraid to get right back in our faces. Good stuff. You know, we hope to have a lot more of that in the future now, especially now that we got the phone tap. We'll see how you guys tolerate the Michael Welch interview from last month. And we're going to be able to move forward. We got a lot of cool stuff lined up for this year. And I think that we're still going strong. And this new year, 2005, what the hell? Crying out loud, yesterday I graduated high school. You know, that was 87, do the math. And it's like, we're almost looking at 30. Now I'm starting to sound like a frickin' Jax representative. We're talking 20 years later, 30 years later. We're talking 20 years later. I'm looking back going, damn, I just felt like I got out of high school. You know, well, I can understand why. I'm still playing the same games I was playing in high school. But it's a very interesting thing, folks, and we're hoping to be here for a lot longer. We're having a good time still. We're starting to see a lot of our predictions come into fruition, which is a cool thing because unless you have a longevity-type show, you can't do that sort of thing. Hopefully we're going to be here for many years to come, and I want to thank everybody for listening. And now, with all of that crap out of the way, let's get into the meat of the show. We've got cool stuff coming up, so stick around. This month's editorial commentary, I'd like to reflect on a subject that I've been screaming about for years. It's also the subject that people have basically told me I'm insane, I'm crazy, I'm out of line. I'm a jealous loser that just doesn't understand how business economics works and how I should just roll over and be happy that these companies are out here to take my cash. I'm talking about the evil behavior of large companies. Now, I've been screaming about Microsoft for the last several years, and anybody who's tuned into the show knows there's nothing more than I like than to bash Microsoft and Xbox, because personally they play in a field where their monopoly affects my livelihood. Now, for the average Joe consumer, nobody gives a rat's ass about Microsoft. Oh, Microsoft, Windows, I love Windows, right? I love Internet Explorer, I love Outlook. Right? That's because they're average Joe users who monopolistic operating system practices don't affect. All right? And I've been screaming about how bad that Microsoft has been for competition, how they have constantly used product dumping in their monopoly to corner markets. Anything that they go after, they can basically take. And they've obviously got enough money to stop the government from enforcing that rule. You know? A couple years ago, the Department of Justice said you will make it so that IE can be removed from the operating system. That's to protect us. If you don't want Internet Explorer on your operating system, you should be able to take it off. Right? Well, the way that the DOJ's wording in the document was, and you can say, oh, well, that's the Department of Justice's fault. They should have worded it better. No, you know what? You need to be the pissed off consumer, because you're the one who's getting screwed by these shady business practices, okay? Instead of actually complying with the spirit of the law laid down by the government, Microsoft allowed you to change what the default browser was. You could go to an option, you could say, my default browser will be Opera, my default browser will be Firefox. It didn't remove Internet Explorer from the system, it let it remove it from your desktop. So they got around it, and the DOJ let it go, you know. What could they do, right? So I've been screaming about this problem. And like I said, for years and years, I've been hearing it on the message boards. I've been hearing it left and right. Well, you're just jealous because Microsoft's got a lot of money. Or you're just jealous because Microsoft's got shrewd business practices. You're just jealous, right? You'd do the same thing if you were in their shoes. Well, anybody who's listened to the show more than 2 episodes knows that's not true. This month, in December, Electronic Arts revealed that they will have an exclusive license for NFL, the NFL, the National Football League. In other words, nobody else can make a game featuring NFL or the NFL logo or anything that relates to the NFL for 5 years. That's this generation of consoles and the next one. 5 years. There will be EA NFL, and that's it. Now, this pissed people off. Heaven forbid. This actually has raised headlines. This has got the media in an uproar. This has got gamers everywhere pissed off. This is absolutely no different in a monopolistic practice than Microsoft has done in the past. But nobody cares about Microsoft. That's not close enough to home, right? Instead, Electronic Arts has to go and pull the biggest a-hole move of the decade for anybody to pay attention. Well, now everyone's going, oh, well, now I'm starting to see what Shane's talking about. Now I start to understand. Well, no kidding. You know, it frustrates me to no end to have people criticize. So now people are starting to understand. Monopoly equal bad. Just a shame it took you so long to figure it out. We're also starting to see other little great anti-consumer good things come up. Just recently, the Apple iPod, for those of you who have iPod tattooed on your ass, which it seems like if you own one, there's a required tattoo that must be placed on your body somewhere, because the iPod people make us old Amiga and Linux people look like fanboys. You know what I'm saying? So apparently, and here's the story, it turns out that you can't put tunes onto an iPod, or something to this effect. I'd have to pull the article out. But basically, Apple made it to where nobody else could download songs from the internet onto the iPod. That's how I understand it. I'm sure someone will write and correct me. Well, Real Networks, who makes Real Player and all of its used to be cool but now not cool technology, came up with a methodology of hacking the files onto the iPod so that you could use their music download service. Now, I'm sort of two minds of this, okay? In one respect, it's Apple's right to lock down their hardware, all right? It's their right to protect their investment in iTunes. I'm not totally unreasonable where I don't understand that. However, it's not like you're producing a niche device, right? You're not producing a tag labeler, right? You put some batteries in it, you type a little message on the little screen, you push a button and the tape comes out, right? That's kind of a niche device. You know, 1 out of 5 people don't need a tape labeler. So if you create a cartridge for that tape labeler and only you create the cartridge for it, okay, you're kind of supporting, you know, your design and your hardware. Okay, I'm okay with that. That's kind of what we're talking about here. But the iPod is supposed to be a musical playback device. That's a little on the generic side. And anytime you take a generic, like a television, if I took a television and the television was locked out so that you could only get cable from Cox, people would have a crap attack, right? Because the TV is a generic use item. The iPod is a generic use item. For them to close the format screws the consumer. That's who they're screwing. They're not screwing Real Player or Microsoft. They're screwing the consumer. And the consumer's like, oh, cool, iTunes. You know? I get sick of that crap. So, in essence, what I feel that Real Player didn't step outside any bounds. Right, so Apple really doesn't have a beef with them. And apparently, a judge must have seen it that way because they didn't force Real to stop doing what they were doing. Instead, Apple took an aggressive approach with either a firmware upgrade or something. This is pretty late breaking as I'm recording this. They reached out, and somehow they're managing to stop iPods from downloading Real Player files. Okay? Yeah, it's just crazy. This is crazy. The only people that are losing are the consumers. The people you're trying to provide product to are the ones that are losing this corporate war that's going on. This money. I got the money. I need the money. Give me the money. All of this money is starting to make companies lose their freaking minds. Apple being one of them. Okay, that's just plain losing your minds. And now, oh my God, just today, an hour ago, I read a news article sent to us by our esteemed producer, Brian Smith, sends me an article that Microsoft's getting into the anti-spyware software business. Well, let's think about that. What's that all about? We're going to sell you, probably, software to patch the holes that we have control over putting the holes on your system. How on earth does that work out? How on earth is that legal? How on earth can you say, I'm going to provide you with a product that is full of holes, and we've admitted it, that's full of problems, and then turn around and sell you something to fix it. If it's not illegal, and it's got to be somewhere on the books, but Microsoft's got enough money, so who cares, right? They can buy their way out of it, just like they bought their way out of the DOJ edict, right? So it's like selling you a faulty car, and then when you go back to get the car fixed, and say, oh, here's a couple of pieces you're missing, that'll be $500. All right? So you know what they'll do? This is very clever. This is that shrewd, evil business practice I'm talking about. They're going to turn around and say, oh, you know what? You're right. We shouldn't sell this to you. Here, take it for free. In fact, we'll put it into Longhorn so you never have to pay for that naughty spyware software again. So instead of being declared the toads that they are, Microsoft gets to look like the good guy for providing you with a free solution. You don't have to buy adware or whatever anymore, right? Because Microsoft is going to product dump it on you. Solving a PR problem, managing to gain another piece of market that they shouldn't have to begin with. For crying out loud, they perpetrate spyware. They perpetrate the market. How dare they? How dare they sell a product that hopes to combat it? It's like Hotmail. Pay for Hotmail and we'll reduce your spam. Well, for crying out loud, 3/4 of the Hotmail spam you get comes from Microsoft or their affiliates. Microsoft gives it away. They're blocking their own spam. How the hell am I the only one that doesn't think that this is totally out of this world? That people are out of their freaking minds for letting this sort of thing go on? That companies shouldn't have their asses kicked up one side of the street and down the other for doing silly, stupid crap like this. All right? Everybody says it's not going to happen. There's some guy working in his garage right now that's going to topple Microsoft. Not going to happen. You can say, oh, Linux is going to take... No, it's not. Linux is not going to take Microsoft down. Okay? They're really, in this day and age of money, in this day and age of convergence, in this day and age of all the things that have made this society go to hell in a handbasket, in these days that we live in, we are in a position where monopolies cannot be stopped, where some guy in his garage can't get his product to market. You know why? Because Microsoft owns the goddamn garage that he's in. Microsoft owns the garage he's in. Microsoft owns the power company giving the power to his garage. Explain to me how this guy in the garage has a half a chance in hell of toppling Microsoft when Microsoft owns the chair he's sitting on, the power he's using, the tools he's using to get there. Okay? How are we going to stop this? How do we stop companies like Electronic Arts? You think this is over? You think that there's not a conspiracy brewing in here between Electronic Arts and Microsoft? Oh, man. See, that's another thing. I'm going to say this now. I'm going to put it on record. And people, no, there's nothing like that going on, Shane. You're being paranoid. No, you're being ignorant. No. Yeah, I'm so ignorant. That's why I keep being right all the time. Okay? Somewhere down the road, NFL football, since it's completely controlled by EA, and since EA quickly climbed into bed with Microsoft, I'm guessing that the only way you're going to get to play NFL online is through an Xbox. Because that's the sort of creepy, satanic, unholy unions that happen between companies like Microsoft and Electronic Arts. The storm's coming. The crap storm is coming, and nobody is seeing it. I've been streaming for years. There's a video game crash coming, right? Until recently, everybody thought I lost my freaking mind. Now Electronic Arts buys NFL. Oh, well, I didn't really agree with Shane up till now, but, after seeing this, yeah, you know what, though? You guys, I've been telling you this. This is my year 6 rant about how for the last 5 years I've been telling you crap and nobody's been listening. Well, now I'm telling you again. I'm showing you the signs of the apocalypse. I'll talk in tongues if that's what it requires to get people to listen and get people to take action. Okay? We just saw Electronic Arts is basically running a sweatshop of employees. Electronic Arts just bought the NFL. And to top that all off, some guy bought Elvis for $100 million. How do you buy somebody's likeness? When I die, somebody could buy my likeness and run pictures and do things with it and run promotions. How does that work out? I think the whole world's lost their freaking minds buying Elvis's likeness. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. And if you don't think this stuff's coming, folks, if you still think that Crazy Shane is still on one of his wild rants with nothing to support what he's saying, the support is all around you, and it's coming. You can see it and say, well, that doesn't affect me, so I don't care. That doesn't mean it's not there. Okay? Personally, I don't play football games I don't play football, period, either on the computer or obviously outside. Look at my picture. So I don't care if EA owns the NFL. There are people out there right now that are about ready to commit harakiri because somebody owns the NFL for video games. Right now I'm sitting back going, yeah, it sucks. It proves my point. It's great talk for the radio. But in all honesty, I don't care. I'm never going to play NFL 2.x anything. Well, it doesn't affect me. Why should I care? Screw you guys. I'm sorry. EA owns the NFL. Too bad for you. Ha, 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 ha. Right? I can take that approach. But I can see the writing on the wall. Nostradamus, that's me. And I will be making predictions, continuous predictions, throughout the year on Retro Gaming Radio. I've been making predictions. Everything I talk about, sans one or two small items, and these aren't even big flick items, everything I talk about happens. You know, I get either I'm just really lucky, or perhaps maybe I see stuff that everybody else just either doesn't see or doesn't care about. So, I'm not going to sit and chatter on and on about this because it's barely scantily related to classic gaming. But I just want people to know that I don't make this stuff up. There's evidence to support what I've been telling people. And it wouldn't hurt you to open up and listen a little bit. Go back to some of the past shows. Hear what I've said. Stuff's popping up right in front of your eyes now. You can't deny me that I was right. You can't deny that what I have not predicted hath not cometh, for it doth cometh in this year. Anyway, people, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to keep this rant fairly short, but it just occurred to me after seeing all of this news and all of these creepy business practices and all of this stuff that makes me want to just wring somebody's neck that I just had to share an old-time rant for a new Retro Gaming Radio. To ring in the new year, we have an exhaustive Bits and Bytes segment. It's absolutely huge. I swear I got like 60 things to talk about here. So let's just get into it. The first link I've got for you, I'm going to call it Nintendo DS owned. There is a uncleclive.co.uk. This was obviously before the Nintendo was released, but they have some, shall we say, satirical looks at the dual screen Nintendo DS. Some of this is actually pretty funny, including using the bottom screen as a "Have you seen this man?" billboard. Some pretty funny stuff. Hey, see, even I have a sense of humor about things I like. So I'll give you a link to that. For you Neo Geo lovers, apparently Sega and SNK are bringing back the classic Neo Geo arcade stick for Sony's popular home console, the PlayStation 2. It'll be called, imaginatively enough, Neo Geo Stick 2. 10th anniversary of King of Fighters series. It'll go on sale in Japan February 17th. No idea when it'll hit here, but little commemorative things for those of you who love Neo Geo. I am not one of them. Also in the lighter side of the news, the British computer game maker Peter Molyneux, I believe is how you pronounce that. It sounds French to me, not British, but hey, you know, whatever. You might recognize his name from such recent titles as Fable, where he publicly apologized for it. What's that all about? Black and White, which was a cool game until it turned into a virtual pet. Dungeon Keeper, Magic Carpet being the title that actually converted me from Amiga to PC. Theme Park Syndicate, and of course the Populous series. Good stuff there. He was recently, he wasn't knighted, he was brought into some British honor thing. They call it OBE, and I looked it up before the show, and I completely dropped what it was. Anyway, he has been made an OBE. So that's sort of like being knighted or something. So it's a big thing. And, of course, Peter's very a prolific kind of guy. He's in the news a lot. So I'll give you a link, and you can look that up. Some interesting information in there as well. For those of you who loved Maniac Mansion, they're going to be making a remake. Not necessarily LucasArts, but the group of fans are creating a Maniac Mansion Deluxe, a remake of the 1987 LucasArts Maniac Mansion. Now, believe it or not, I did not get into the game, Maniac Mansion. I know a lot of people that did, which is why I'm bringing it up. But it's nice to see that the fans are actually getting involved with preserving their past as well. That's a good thing. Can't see anything wrong with that. And this, hasn't been the first time this has happened. There have been groups that have tackled other Sierra games like King's Quest and Space Quest. There's a pretty devoted group of fans out there for these things. This is not, shall we say, approved. And they, of course, hope that LucasArts does not come down on them for that. Who knows? Who knows? It would be a tragedy to see that happen. But there's some very interesting stuff in the article. They're basically making sure they don't monkey with the actual game itself because that's important to them. And they're doing what I've always said to do, which was improve the graphics, improve the sound, and leave everything else alone. And that's pretty much what they're doing. So kudos to them. I hope more people in the future take an active role in preserving their past, since so few people seem to care anymore. For those of you who play online, griefers are probably no new thing to you. These guys are defined as a small but seemingly eradicatable set of players who want nothing more than to murder, loot, and otherwise frustrate the heck out of everybody else. And this is one of those things that I talk about a lot, except for I use a different word. They're called lifers. They have no other life but to be in existence in this game. They have all the free time in the world because they live with their mom in their basement, don't have any bills, they don't have to have a job. Mom does their laundry and, cooks meals for them. You know what I'm talking about. Well, apparently, the publishers are ganging up on these guys, these lifer dogs that are trying to make misery meat out of the rest of the people who are trying to play and enjoy themselves. This is akin to piracy. You're not going to stop these people. The best you're going to do is spend a lot of money trying to control them, which is one of the reasons why I really don't play online games, along with all the other reasons I bitch about constantly on the show. But this is an interesting article here that talks about it and the company perspective and some of this other good stuff. So it's worth looking at if you're an online game player, if you're just interested in the topic. And those of you who found a lot more fun behind Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2 than you ever found in Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, or the latest San Andreas version of the title, will be happy to know that Rockstar Classics, apparently a new division of Rockstar because I have not heard of them before, is nicely giving away copies of Grand Theft Auto, Volume 1, and Volume 2 as well. So those of you who are into the original versions of the game, you can get in on those. Free downloads right from Rockstar Classics site, which is rockstargames.com/classics. Whew. There's a bunch of good stuff in here you need to read, though, before you download it. There's a bunch of disclaimers, all that other good stuff. So it's nice of them, and I'm just going to read you this first little bit here on their site because I think it's important. In 1999, Rockstar Games and Rockstar North, then known as DMA Design, which many of you will know as being developers that worked under the Psygnosis label, making great games like Lemmings and Blood Money and a bunch of other great titles. Further, the groundbreaking gameplay concept establishes 2 years prior to the original Grand Theft Auto with the release of Grand Theft Auto 2. Grand Theft Auto 2 expanded on the top-down, open-ended crime world gameplay formula with a host of new features, including the advent of multiple rival gangs, 7 to be exact, including the Yakuza. Basically, they tell you in the paragraphs that follow that they're giving props to the original games. That's great stuff, That seems to be real popular these days. I think later on in the Bits and Bytes segment, we're going to talk about another company that's doing the same thing. In fact, we've talked in the past about Cinemaware doing it. I think it's great. I think it's great that companies are acknowledging, if you will, their roots and are willing to give this stuff away. Now, granted, sometimes it's for shameless promotion of a new version of the title, which, of course, is probably this in relation to San Andreas. But at the same time, you got to give them a little bit of kudos, even though they're probably just snaking you on it. And speaking of free stuff, now I've never played this game Anarchy online, but apparently Anarchy is a sci-fi, massively multiple user role-playing thing, except for it's science fiction based instead of fantasy based. For those of you who like StarCraft over Warcraft, I'm sure this is for you. Apparently you can download the full version of Anarchy, no cost for the client, and you can register for a free account and get online right away and play for free. Now you do have until January 15th to do that. There's a bunch of small print in the registration you better take a look at. You don't have access to the expansion packs, etc., etc. So basically this is kind of a carrot. So this is a little bit older news. You probably already have heard about it, but for those of you who are into the massive role-playing online sort of thing, then this is a good deal. You get it for free. I'm sure it's not forever, so make good use of it while you can. Free is the operative word for Bits and Bytes this month, I think. For those of you who have been on the forums and think that convergence is not the selling point of the PlayStation Portable or the PSP from Sony, I'd like to direct your attention to the sudden urge of Nintendo to put out a media player add-on for the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS. I'll give you a link to that. You can check it out. Basically, to keep the man down is what I'm thinking. They don't want to be left behind in what they may have underestimated was important in a convergence device. Personally, I won't own one, but it's looking like it'll be pretty cheap. It'll be something like $39, probably cheaper by the time it gets out. Uses standard SD cards, which is a joy for all of you who are dreading buying a Sony PlayStation Portable card, which will be the Sony proprietary memory stick, which is evil incarnate. So basically you have access to playing your media on the Game Boy or DS, and I'll tell you the DS screen apparently makes that video look a lot better from some of the other articles I was reading. So there's a little bonus for those of you who don't think there's any reason to have a DS. If you are looking at the PSP for a convergence thing, you got an option now. And the nice thing is, since it's a Game Boy Advance card, it will plug into the Game Boy Advance slot, leaving your DS slot free for Super Mario, Zookeeper, and all that other good stuff. So we'll give you a link to that. There's tons of people wrote in about that. Old news probably now, but what the heck, right? Got to keep up to date. Okay. Some rumor control. GameSpot, if you're a GameSpot.com aficionado, you'll know that they have this little thing called rumor control, where every so often they put out a rumor and an official story response to the rumor mill. They call it rumor control. I've seen a few of these, and this one got sent in. It deals with the PlayStation Portable defects and the fact that EA is dumping the Madden likeness in the Madden football likeness name type thing. So, if you're interested in either of those topics, you'll want to check out that rumor control page. Interesting stuff. We have another article here about another online service kicking the dust, Ultima Online. If you were a fan of that or want more information about Ultima Online or where it's going, you might want to check this link out. Effectively titled Ultima Online Rest in Peace. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of good stuff in here. Very interesting if you were, say, an early beta tester, which I was, and if you played the game. Some interesting stuff in here. Definitely interesting to check out. Recommend that for anybody who's into that sort of goodies. We've got so many EA articles this month. I can't get my hands around it. Oh, Slashdot, while I'm thinking about it, had a post about, they titled it High School Dropout Self-Taught Chip Designer. I believe I titled the link More Information on Jerry Ellsworth. Name sounds familiar. Jerry was the mastermind behind the Commodore DTV, the 30-in-1 pack that we talked about on the Christmas show this last year. So you get the chance to meet her, and it's kind of nice that she got a little plug here on Slashdot, because no matter what you think of her, she's a pretty brilliant person, and we have an accurate 30-in-1 controller finally that plays Commodore 64 games, largely thanks to her. So check that out. It's nice, little Slashdot news and information there. I have an article here, too, from GameDaily.com that talked about Nintendo's late 2004 piracy crackdown. And again, this is some fairly older news, but I don't think I talked about it on the show. There's been a run on grayware, is a good word for it, Nintendo game units. If you walk through pretty much any mall in America, you will see some guy playing Mario Brothers on what looks like a Nintendo 64 controller or a old Nintendo controller. These gray dealers are selling 30-in-1, 60-in-1, 100, 1,000-in-1, Super Joy, Power Joy, Super Stick, Power Player. It comes under a bunch of different names. And Nintendo has been putting the crackdown on those. So if you've got one, it's a good eBay item now. If you don't have one, wander down to the mall, pick something up, leave it sealed, and who knows, in 3 or 4 years, you might be able to make mad fat cash on eBay. Yeah. Got to have an eagle eye for these eBay things. Somebody wrote in about a remake, or should I say, a game inspired by an original RPG. I was not familiar with the original game, the Tower of Druaga. These don't have pronunciation guides with them, folks. I do the best I can. Apparently, that was a big game back in 1984, and they're going to make a remake, The Nightmare of Druaga, or however you pronounce that, for the PlayStation 2. So, for those of you who are into it, the graphics look nice. Thank you. So, if you're into that, definitely check that out. It'll be going for $40. And it looks like Namco's got some official stuff on their site as well. Whew, most exciting. We talked about the Game Boy Advance being used as a prequel to anesthesia in many hospitals for children who are undergoing surgery. Now we have another article here. The doctor uses video game to hone skills. So surgeons who play video games 3 hours per week have 37% fewer errors and accomplish tasks 27% faster. Basing his observation on results of tests using the video game Super Monkey Ball, which I guess could be Super Monkey Appendectomy, maybe? I don't know. Don't know how that works out, but anyway, we'll give you the article for it. Pretty funny stuff. I love some of these stories. It's great. Apparently, we're going to get a Playboy video game. And I'm not sure exactly how this wandered into the classic thing, other than, all of us young males grew up with a special affection for that magazine deep in our hearts. Of course, those who did not go on to be priests, they got a different magazine like Boy's Life. Anyway, they're saying that we've got a Playboy the Mansion video game. Will be released on the 25th. So apparently we get lots of scantily clad women. You get to play Hugh Hefner, complete with the pajamas. You must allot your time and money from start to end, creating the magazine, directing photo shoots, constructing the iconic mansion, and socialize. Well, I can see the parents not liking that. Quote, Playboy is truly an aspirational lifestyle brand, and we are going to allow new and existing Playboy brand users to live the lifestyle and build the empire. There's only one building being erected there. We got an article here, the weirdest games of 2004. And we got a whole listing here. This is compliments of PCWorld.com. They named some of their games such as Orbs, Rocket Bowl, Gish, Bad Mojo, that weird game that everyone talks about on the forums, Katamari Damacy, whatever, however you pronounce that. Basically, you roll around and you collect crap up on your little roller ball. We talked about this on another show. Anyway, so they talk about some of the weirdest games of 2004. Some interesting stuff there. Never know, you find innovation and stuff like that. Apparently, there is a race going out to see who can get the Nintendo DS tunneled online first. There's at least 2 groups, including the famous Warp Pipe, who was diligently working on getting Nintendo GameCube online to be able to play like Mario Kart and all that good stuff. And a couple of other groups that are looking to do that. We'll give you a link to the Warp Pipe Technologies version of what they're trying to do. X-Link is the other group that's trying to do it, and apparently there's this big battle ensuing between X-Link and Warp Pipe. Interesting stuff if you like that elitist fighting stuff. And, sometimes you just need to have some of that in your life. It's just that important. Adware company offers classic video games. Oh, boy, can this just not go anywhere fun. Zango Games said yesterday it teamed with game developer Zombie Studios to release 20 redesigned classics like Missile Command and Asteroids for free online play in the coming months. 10 of the games, a mix of arcade, board, and card games, were made available on Monday for syndication to web publishers. The other 10 games will be released over the next 3 to 6 months. 180 Solutions redirects users to the actual web pages of its advertisers in a separate pop-up window when the user requests further information about goods and services online while playing the game. The company serves pop-ups 2 to 3 times during the average browsing session. I love this. This is my favorite quote ever. "We prefer the term sponsorware to adware," says the guy that was talking about this. "We're definitely not talking about adver gaming here. And we don't interrupt users while they're playing. Pop-ups interrupt me when I'm playing. They interrupt me when I'm surfing. They can't help but interrupt me while I'm playing." Interesting article all the same. That's from Media Daily News. Give credit where credit's due. Keep running into these electronic arts ones as I bring these guys up. Unbelievable how many electronic arts stuff I've got. Here's an interesting article. Oldsters can stay on key and on track. In many of today's video games, the hand-cramping, button-jamming combinations needed to execute even the most elementary movements are downright trying, and that's for teens. Imagine if you're a couple generations beyond. Your gaming reflexes may have rusted. You may be reapproaching the genre with more nostalgia than skill, and you may be totally confounded by the complexity of today's controls. You may also be less than enthused about your son or daughter whipping your ass on screen time and time again. This article goes into discussion about some of our geezer games that could be a little friendlier to us older folk. Some of the games they name, Burnout 3, which of course we talked about a lot on the show, great game, Tiger Woods PGA Golf, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, Taiko Drum Master, Karaoke Revolution Volume 3, which is awesome, and the Retro Atari Flashback. I'm not sure which one they're talking about here. But in any event, so, interesting article if you think you're too old to game. I'm not, but I still like some of those games. One of the most anticipated titles for the Nintendo DS was one of the best-selling games on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, WarioWare Inc. The new version, WarioWare Touched, apparently there are some problems with some of the mini-games in the Japanese version of the game. It will be hitting the American shores under the name WarioWare Touched in February, one of the games I'm waiting for. Apparently there's 3 or 4 games in there that cannot be completed. You're supposed to draw cords to connect a light bulb to a battery, but the cords can't be drawn. You're supposed to draw a fuse from a bomb to a fire source, but you can't draw that. So there's a couple little bummers in there. So now I'm assuming that these will be fixed before they hit American shores, but you never know. Good to check into it before you make that big purchase. So hopefully, if you have not already purchased it from overseas and imported it, which you can do, and apparently it's very playable, you might want to hold out and make sure that you get a copy. It's all fixed up. We have another article here from GameTunnel.com, 2004's Independent Game of the Year. Top 10 games of the year for 2004, according to Game Tunnel, the Independent Underground, loaded with advertising that I do not have blocked. How about that? Eye of the Enemy comes in at number 10. Revolved comes up as number 9. And you can go through 6 more pages of this. I'm trying to see if there's any names that I have mentioned on the show before. Hamster Ball better be in here, along with Break Quest. I can spot talent. What can I tell you? There's some other... there's some cool-looking games in here. Yep, there's Break Quest, comes in at number 5. That's right, of course. What else do we got? My goodness. Don't know that one. There's some interesting stuff in here. So there's some... I'll have to come back here and check it out in detail. There's some good stuff. Hamster Ball comes in at number 3. Now, folks, if you haven't played Hamster Ball and you love Marble Madness, there's just no reason not to be in here. Way too cool. And let's see, what did they name as number 1 game of the year? Gish. I guess I'm truly... Oh, I've played this before. I didn't get it. I tried Gish, and, I couldn't get into it. Anybody play Gish? Do me a favor and write up on the forums and tell me what you think. I didn't care for it, interestingly enough. But then, I got a couple of the other ones on the top 10, so there you go. There's some good stuff else in here, more of the top gaming things of 2004. This time we get the top 20 gaming laws, 2004. There's some good stuff in here. The first paragraph reads, the year has come to an end, and before we think of New Year's resolutions we can't meet, take a step back and reminisce all that was wrong this past year in gaming. Number 20 is the Half-Life 2 Steam situation where that you couldn't get your game registered and all the other crap that went behind Steam. Duke Nukem Forever, of course, clocks in at number 19. Microsoft first-party sports titles whacked. Fallout RPG canned. Video games make you fat. Gran Turismo 4. And it just goes on from there. So there's some fun stuff in here. You should definitely take a read at that. I liked that a lot. Too many EA articles in here. Okay, let's move on. Zavix, I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. Zavix, I'll give you a link here. I've asked these guys for more information, but they have, strangely enough, not responded to me. Basically, this is supposed to be a interactive video game unit that plugs into your TV that you can use actual motion, that does like motion capture or whatever off of you. Sort of like the iToy, I guess. I don't know. It's like a video game console. And there's limited amounts of information on the site, even though the site's very slick. It reminds me of the Phantom console, which we got some more news for you about that later on in the show. And they've adopted the old Microvision tactic where the CPU and all of the hardware to play the game is in the cartridge, not in the console. That sounds sort of Neo Geo-ish to me, right? You're going to end up paying $300 for the game and $5 for the console? I don't know. But anyway, check it out. If I hear any more back from them, of course, I'll tell you about it on a later show, but I'm not overly optimistic. Now we're going to file this under, I wish I could feel sorry for you, but I don't. Bare breast teen in video game sues to stop it. Article starts off, a Texas teenager shown bare-breasted on the Guy Game video game has sued its designer and distributor and manufacturers of the machine on which it was played in an attempt to halt further sales. She apparently posed for a Spring Break Hotties video or shoot, something to that effect, and apparently she signed a waiver, I'm sure, just like they make everybody else signs. But apparently she was a minor at that time, something to that effect. I wish I could feel more sorry for this person, but obviously she's at fault. Sorry. If you're going to show your breasts and sign something that says you can use my breasts, well, I'm sorry. But you just don't have a lot to talk about. The lawsuit says the girl appears topless in the game as a reward for successful answers to a trivia question. Her breasts are exposed in a manner that is sexually suggestive, lewd. I just can't even go into this. I'll just go off. Anyway, you can read the rest of the article. Whew. We also have here an article about the top 10 things you need to know about Sony's PlayStation Portable, the PSP. And if you want an interesting follow-up to this, I take every point on this article and discuss it on the forums. This was a little early news, but we had a good chance to talk about it. There are some interesting comments on the forum. You could drop in and add your comments. Just to give you some highlights here, the top 10 reason. When one of the reasons is the battery time issue is fixable. I just can't get over that. The battery time issue is fixable. So basically, one of the top 10 reasons is that you can have a workaround for a problem that's inherent to the system. I don't know. Anyway, you can read that whole thing, and they bring up a lot of my favorite thing that they bring up is like sleep mode, things that you go, duh. Yeah, there's a lot of that in here. But anyway, check it out. The handheld console wars are just now beginning. It'll be interesting to see what's going on. Speaking of the Phantom we mentioned earlier, the the Phantom Vaporware. Never before have I heard of a product that was more aptly named than the Phantom video game console. Now here's something. This is Infinium Labs, by the way. I'm sure you've heard the name. The Phantom Game Service is now what it's being called, because you're not going to own a damn thing on that console. You're not going to be able to buy games. Totally closed source on that guy. Now this is kind of spooky. They're going to be at the Consumer Electronics Show. Guess what booth they're going to be in? They're going to be sharing a booth with Microsoft. Does that just make the hair stand up on your neck or what? I need to understand why Microsoft lets a direct competitor to the Xbox in on their booth. There's something creepy going on here, folks. You mark my words. We're going to hear more about this in the future. It's goofy, scary stuff. I'm telling you. Oh, those of you who are Super Nintendo heads, and there are many of you in my listening audience, there is a new build of ZSNES, the popular Super Nintendo, Super Famicom emulator. They've got builds for Linux, just about everything else under the sun, including Windows. This is the first build in almost 2.5 years, so there's a little benchmark there for you. If you are into Super Nintendo emulation, we'll provide you a link. You probably already know about it, but hey, we're doing our part to support our listeners. Speaking of Nintendo and the NES, the original NES, I was sent several times a link to the Nintendo NES overclocking page, where they show you how to overclock your Nintendo, 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment Center. They've got videos, procedures, frequently asked questions. If that is something of interest to you and you like hacking your old hardware, by all means, please go check that out. You know, this is one I submitted. I forgot about it until I started reviewing them for the show. People have officially lost their minds. Somebody came up, you know the little flavored mints called Smint? They come in this weird plastic box. Somebody took one of those and made it into a Nintendo DS cartridge holder. The good news is it'll hold 3 Nintendo games, which means you only need 2 to hold your entire Nintendo DS collection at this time. But, you know, I was sitting here thinking about it. It's like, how cheap are you, you know, to use a Smint box? I mean, I guess it's innovative and all that, but, man, buy a bag or something. I mean, come on. Anyway, enough of that. There is a set of picture gallery. There's a couple of picture galleries here about Commodore hardware. Some good stuff in here. Some Commodore projects, some people doing some weird hardwiring to old Commodore hardware. These come compliments of groups like the Toronto Pet Users Group, who are celebrating their 25th anniversary, 25 years at the World of Commodore Expo. That happened this last December. You'll also see some links to the C64 DTV. Some other good stuff there. So, Commodore Photo Gallery, those of you who are commie heads like me, will want to check that out. Someone submitted me a website that's basically in Chinese or Japanese or something that I can't read. I just get a bunch of square boxes, and it wouldn't do any better even if I did see the language, because I certainly can't read it. There's a game called Warning Forever, which apparently is an old school shoot 'em up, bang bang blast, 5 billion things on the screen at once kind of games, much like Raiden, right? Those sort of older games that have all that stuff moving along. I'm assuming that the download now button actually works. You could grab this game. They have a whole bunch of download sites and versions and whatnot, but you just can't read anything about it. If you're a fan of those old style shooters, you might want to check this out. The guy that sent it in gave rave reviews about it. Probably won't be reviewing that in the future, but I figured I'd pass it along just to help out, because it's the kind of guy I am. Who says you can't get famous anymore by breaking world records? Our buddies over at Twin Galaxy has posted a press release that Gary Whalen has beaten the world record on, of all things, Galaxian. Now, I can't think of another game that I would like less to play for an ungodly amount of time than Galaxian. I'm trying to actually think of a game that I would rather play for that long. Basically anything. So anyway, this article over at Twin Galaxies talks a little bit about his wife and his marriage based on all of this stuff that he was doing, and it's interesting. He played 2 hours like a day or something like that playing Galaxian. I'm trying to get my head around the concept playing Galaxian for 2 hours a day. I hope I read that wrong. Maybe not. Speaking of pissed off wives, we have a BBC News link here. Confessions of a Game Widow. I labeled it FPS Widow because they're not talking about games. They're talking about FPS games, more or less. And this just gives you sort of a rundown about the other sides of people who are lifer dogs that do nothing else but play these games. There's some interesting comments in here. I got to read a couple of these. Some of these are classic. Let me see if I can find one that's really good. And they do talk about playing other games, but the article opens with the FPS stuff. My relationship of 6 years ended because of the PlayStation. When our son was born, my partner spent all of his time playing games. We never went to bed at the same time due to him staying up as he just wanted to get just to a certain level. He slept during the day due to being up all night, and I was left holding the baby, literally. Our relationship ended, and he admits now that it was down to the PlayStation. I'm now happy I have a new partner who does not own a game console. Every cloud has a silver lining. Interesting stuff in here. There's like, I don't know, dozens of, the list goes on and on. I'm sitting here scrolling down looking for the end. But here we go. I couldn't help but laugh after reading your Games Widow article. I too have suffered the loss of a partner to that evil black box in the corner of my room. I witnessed my usually lovely bloke turn into a cross-eyed, twitching warrior and tripped over many a console cable in the process. One day I decided enough was enough and thought, if you can't beat him, join him. In came broadband, Xbox Live, and seriously, it turned out to be not so bad. Those evenings of pre-menstrual kind are now whiled away, screaming abuse at some American at the other end of the line and killing aliens, bugs in the most unsavory manner. Great once a month, but only in small doses. I'd still take a bath in a box of chocolates any day. Well, comparing the Xbox to chocolates, isn't that fun? Okay, that's enough of that. Commodore up for sale again. My God, this changes hands more than $20 bill on Bourbon Street. Tulip Computers, who has held the rights to Commodore since 1997, said Thursday will sell the once mighty Commodore computer brand to U.S.-based, oh my God, how do you pronounce this? Yaronimo, is this English-based, U.S.-based? Yaronimo Media Ventures Incorporated for $33 million. Now, here's the part that should scare the living crap out of all of you. A company spokesman said they would take actions against possible copyright infringements of the Commodore name in the United States, as well as release a new MP3 player and re-release classic games. Those of you who have been printing fraudulent Commodore logos on T-shirts and selling them for $30, your time is coming. And all of you Commodore 64 sites that have bin files for Commodore-related product, BIOSes, this is a symbol, folks. If you ever think that you're going to get into Commodore 64 emulation in the future, I would go and get that stuff now. Because I promise you, emulators are going to get the crackdown big time. And all of those cool BIOSes that we've been taking for granted that come included with emulators are going to go away. You don't spend $33 million for the property and then not do anything about it, especially when they come out and tell you, hey, we're going to do something about it. Go figure. You know, speaking of the Commodore 64, we've talked a lot about Lemon 64, which is a guy by the name of Kim Lemon over in Sweden built Lemon 64, which used to be a huge download site for Commodore 64 game disk images and cartridge images. And recently, it became less than that as some companies were asking him to remove games. Well, Lemon 64 has become more of a review and informational site. And Mr. Lemon has decided to move forward and create an Amiga, lemonamiga.com site. Good stuff in here. Actually, I heeded the call And I sent him probably 30 or 40 scans of classic Amiga games, CD32 boxes, and stuff like that to help support him with this site. And of course, we're good friends with the Lemon sites, and I recommend you check his site out. Good stuff for you Amiga people. Very well done site. I'm a professional web developer myself, and I love his scripting. I love his layout. I love everything about the site. Highly recommended. It's been running really slow lately, though, so don't go there in a hurry. I'm not sure what it's like now, but it was running pretty slow the other day. But you can find some of the best stuff ever here at the Lemon sites. If you're a Commodore fan at all, you've got to go spend some time over there. Thanks to Kim Lemon for doing all of that work. Hopefully my box shots helped out. I just keep running into these EA links. This is crazy. Half the damn things I have left are EA stuff. Oh, here we go. Orgasmic Pinball. Yeah, this is... I don't even know where to begin with this one. The Visible Woman Orgasmic Pinball is a fully functioning pinball machine with the theme of a woman's sexual, quote, pleasure system, quote. Yeah. The visible signs of female sexual excitement are subtle, and the majority of female sex organs are hidden, mysteriously, and frequently misunderstood. This project is designed... I can't make this stuff up. This is too good. This project is designed to bring attention to the female sexual pleasure system in a way that is exciting, affirming, and celebratory. The Visible Woman Orgasmic Pinball is an educational tool. Yeah, I've heard this before. A useful metaphor and an exploration of sexual expression in a culture where repression is the norm. Can't argue about that. But it's also a pinball machine. So I'm going to give you a link. There are images for you to gawk upon. And I would not open these at work, ladies and gentlemen. If you're at work or in a sensitive area, I would definitely... You can go to the site that I give you the link to. Just don't go to the images or anything unless you're alone. Yeah. What else do we got here? Retro Remakes. Yes, Retro Remakes, classic gaming for the next generation at remakes.org. Every year they do a competition of retro remakes. 2004 results are here in full for you to go and look at and download some of this stuff. First prize went to a remake of Legend of Shadow, which I've never even heard of before. Stop the Express, another game I've never heard of. Trashman Anniversary, which I played the new version, but I never played the old version. 4th to 10th place went to Push Penguin, which looks like a Pengo clone. Okay, I knew that one. Picture Mixture, which is a variant of the old slide the pieces around to make the picture. Cookie Cruncher, Haunted House, Dizzy remake, and a game called Kane, and some other stuff. So you might want to check that out. All of the awards have been given. I guess they put like 4,000 pounds or something into... Something like that, 4,000 pounds into the prizes for this stuff. It's big stuff. Too bad I don't know half the games that they made remakes of. But what can you do? Hey, our friends over at X Arcade that make the X Arcade controller, one of the many arcade controller folks out there, including our friends at Hanaho, have a new goodie called Build Your Own Arcade Kit. You can create your own arcade powered by a PC, Mac, or any game system. This kit allows you to create a commercial-grade, arcade-quality, authentic arcade controller or arcade machine in your home instantly with no technical skills. Effortlessly recreate the classic arcade experience with the X Arcade as the brains of your unit. Designed to meet the demands of arcade enthusiasts, the X Arcade Build Your Own Arcade Kit exhibits master craftsmanship with uncompromising attention to detail and quality. The electronics in this kit are using the award-winning X Arcade joysticks and are the industry's only do-it-yourself kits that work with PC, Mac, and any game console. Good stuff here. They have a little spec sheet down here. What you get harnesses, you get all these connectors, all this good stuff. You get versions of Midway Arcade games for the PC. I think they even sell them at like Fry's Electronics, you know. So, hey, if you happen to be in one of those rare locations like we are that has a Fry's Electronics, go check it out. X Arcade has always proven fairly reliable. So, yeah, good stuff here. It seems like more outbound governors are looking to make names for themselves. We yet have another representative of our government trying to control and regulate video games. This one I can almost get behind. This is also the show of the impossible names to speak. Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. I gotta watch CNN more. On Thursday, proposed the state ban to the sale and rental of violently and sexually explicit video games for children under 18, a restriction that has failed so far elsewhere in the country. Now, there's some good points here. Okay, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily a good thing. We've talked about this at length on Retro Gaming Radio's forums. They're basically looking to fine retailers for those that sell or rent these mature-rated games. Now, the problem here is we don't exactly have... This is just like the FCC. They scream, we'll fine you for indecency, but won't tell you what indecency is. What exactly is mature video gaming? Now, we have a voluntary video game rating system, but it's not regulated. Who decides if a game is mature or not? Who decides whether or not a game is appropriate, whether it's too explicit? Well, once again, we get back to semantics. What's explicit to you may not be explicit to me. And until somebody comes up with some sort of a regulation system that works out, that's clearly defined, you can't be making statements like this. If you want to effect a change, you need to put a system in place that is fine-toothed. And that's the problem with the term of indecency or mature, is you cannot fine-tooth comb that because it is objective to who is looking at it. So what's the solution? Normally I don't complain without offering a solution. In this case, all I can tell you is be clear. Be clear on what someone of what age and what group can see. If you're not going to get fine granular, you can't bitch like this. It just can't be done. And with video games making more and more money, they're going to have to come up with a solution. And it can't be this broad indecency crap like the FCC pulls. It doesn't work out that way. That's not fair to anybody. Here's something really interesting, and I don't know if the link from Slashdot still works. CNET has a story about a lawsuit asking for copyright protection to be removed from software while leaving patent protection in place. Intellectual property consultant Greg Aharon. What is this with the weird names? Why can't I get a Smith or something? Greg A. hopes to convince the court that software makers can protect their product adequately through patents, which provide more comprehensive protection but are difficult to obtain and expire in a shorter period of time. It looks like this would hamstring licenses such as GPL, which are often based on copyright privileges, while leaving OSS vulnerable to patent infringements. Apparently he's been working on this for 3 years. Something to look at. Get passionate. Even if it's not necessarily the right thing to do, at least you can say he's passionate about something. OneUp.com loves to bring kids together that hate Pac-Man and make them play Pac-Man. Child's Play was an article that ran, maybe a year ago, something like that. I'm sure it'd tell me in this article if I read it far enough. But they basically take kids that hate classic games, they put them in a room and they record what they say. And it's supposed to be funny. Just like kids say the darndest thing, you could almost care less what they're saying. But anyway, I'll post a link because, some people find that sort of thing entertaining. I, however, do not. Now, here's something that should just make your blood curdle. NBA Ballers and Midway Arcade Treasures, both of which we have talked about in the past, Midway Arcade Treasures more so, have both shipped 1 million units. Wow. 1 million units have sold. Wow. If you've ever played NBA Ballers, you need to play NBA Ballers. And ask Bryan about it sometime on the forums. I love how they talk about this. They could have gone a little more ghetto with this, but listen to the discussion here. This is a quote from Steve Allison. Hey, there's an easy name. Chief Marketing Officer of Midway. NBA Ballers has proven that consumers enjoy Midway's approach to over-the-top, lifestyle-driven sports game, and the strong success of Midway Arcade Treasures goes to show that great classic arcade games never lose their entertainment value. There's some funny. You've got to play NBA Ballers just to understand what we're giggling about over here. Too funny. But anyway, I'll give you the link to that article. You can take a look at that. Some good stuff from CNN.com, the tech department, the Digital Century Video Games and Computing's Hall of Shame. There's some very interesting stuff in here. They talk about things like the Pentium chips floating point problem. They talk about Pong. They talk about the 10 greatest PC games of all time. And let me see if I can give you a list here. Yeah, this is what they name the best 10 games of all time. Now, you tell me if you agree with this. Civilization? Myst? Stop it. Doom? Okay, the first one. Microsoft Flight Simulator? There were better flight simulator games, but okay, I'll give them that one. Half-Life? Okay. SimCity? Okay, I played SimCity. Ultima 4? So funny when they pick a number like in the middle like that. XCOM, now, I'm sorry, I played XCOM and that blew Billy Goat gruff, so I don't know who's smoking what. StarCraft got on the top 10, but not Warcraft. What's that all about? And finally, rounding up the list is Tetris, which, amazingly enough, I happen to agree with. 10 biggest hardware flops. These are some funny stuff in here. I'm going to read this whole list to you because it's funny. The IBM PC Junior. Yeah, can't go wrong there. Next machine, the NEXT machine. Nice. The Apple Lisa. Do you guys even remember the Apple Lisa? I mean, that was like up one day and down the next. The IBM PS2. Gotta love that. The Net PC. I remember that too. Classic. The network computer. Newton's message pad. I love that one. Pentop computers. Okay. Power PC, once seen as the Intel killer, never more than just another Mac. Classic. And the Xerox Alto. Can you say blown opportunity? Good stuff in here. Definitely worth checking out. I like even if I don't agree with them, some of those things are fun. Remember the PlayStation 2 slant TiVo slant DVR slant machine that Sony was going to put out, the PSX, that sort of fizzled out like a bad fart? I mean, you didn't even think it came out and it was already terminated. Yeah. Well, apparently it's back from the grave, says this article from PlayStation.about.com. They're going to bring it back and they're selling it again in Japan. I didn't think it sold well enough to bring it back in Japan, but who knows? Curious what they're doing with that. Yeah, maybe they're just, I don't know what they're doing. I've lost track of those guys. So, PlayStation PSX back from the grave. I don't know why people send me this stuff. I wasn't a Zelda fan, and I couldn't care less if there was another Zelda game coming. But apparently we get another Zelda game, the Mishcap, for the Game Boy Advance, coming to you soon, if it's not already out. Date of release January 10th, so you never know. It might be out, may not be. Capcom's delivering it. Nintendo's famous swords and sorcery champion Link faces some enormous challenges as he journeys through the Lilliputian land of the Minish folks in this Game Boy Advance adventure. Okay, well, those of you who love Zelda, you get another version of it. How nice. Okay, so what else do we got going on here? Yeah, you'd think I'd run out by now, but I'm not. Here's some very interesting article. Those of you who were big Interplay fans, Interplay published tons and tons of games in the 80s and 90s, and apparently they've been around for a while. This is I'm going to tell you what this is apparently coming from a developer here. I'd like to give you just a little synopsis here. The starting of this guy. I once heard that dreams don't die, we kill them. That is not true. Dreams do die, and with them a little part of ourselves. Do I sound bitter? I am bitter, and with good cause. I work for the game publisher Interplay Entertainment as their web application engineer, aka web developer. I finally moved out of information technology into game design, only to have my dreams crumble to dust. Now, if you're not like mad clicking to finish this story, then I didn't give enough build up there. Definitely something for you to read. Good stuff. Just can't get enough of this bashing game developers, can't we, these last couple of months. It's great. I love it. For those of you who did not know about it, there is a new version of Bard's Tale that came out recently, centered on humor, featuring the voice of Cary Ellis. You know, he was the guy from Princess Bride, As You Wish, right? Been in tons of movies, Men in Tights. Great guy. I almost had to get in on the game just because he voiced part of it. But apparently there are many cinematic sequences. It was very funny, good dialogue, etc., etc. But apparently the game did not clock in very well. This article talks a little bit about it. Makes me even less eager to play it, considering it probably shares absolutely nothing at all with the original Bard's Tale. Here's the summation, in case you don't read the article. The Bard's Tale is not a bad pick, but the clever dialogue and comic moments aren't enough to make up for the run-of-the-mill gameplay. Imagine that. Seasoned gamers will get a kick out of the RPG customs it parodies, but the game can be enjoyed just as much as a weekend rental at a fraction of the price. That's called pretty much complete ownership in a politically correct way. Don't you love that? Atari announces retro Atari classics for the Nintendo DS. Now, this is, again, a little bit slightly older news, but those of you who were early adopters like myself that got into the Nintendo DS, we are going to get a retro Atari Classics version for our DS, including Pong, Missile Command, Asteroids, Breakout, Centipede, Tempest, Warlords, Gravatar, Lunar Lander, and Sprint. Whew. Each title will be playable in its original form as well as in an all-new tagged mode, featuring brand new looks from some of today's popular graffiti artists. When did graffiti become an art? The game will take advantage of all the technical innovations the Nintendo DS brings to gaming, including touchscreen functionality for tighter game controls, up to 4 players wireless, multiplayer. Okay, Warlords 4-player wireless would own. Dual screen gameplay for bigger, larger gaming environments, which is practically pointless. And the ability to play head-to-head against other players on the same Nintendo DS in arcade classic fashion. So, I play my turn, you give the DS to somebody else, and they play their turn. Not too bad. Well, we'll see. Early screenshots don't impress me. Being able to see the missiles on the top screen without being able to shoot them pissed me off. What can I tell you? Yes, we are rounding down to only having EA articles left to talk about. Yes, and we have many, many, many of them to discuss with you. Here's another interesting little article about the decline of the video game mascot. I'll tell you why the video game mascot declined. Because you continued to make the same game over and over again with the mascot, pissing everybody off, and your mascot got diluted. Don't you remember when guys were dressed up in Crash outfits and Mario outfits and all that other goofy stuff? When, you heard the name Sonic and it was synonymous with quality? Well, you just don't get that anymore. But this guy wrote a 5-page article on the subject. If you're interested, definitely check that out. We have another little piece of information. We talked a while back about a portable arcade. It was like an arcade device. I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head. I wasn't going to even allude to it. But it was basically a little piece of hardware that let you emulate and build arcade games on it, classic arcade games on it. Well, I've gotten another link. I like the tagline, obsolete by design. That's cool. The Engineer, right? The Engineer Virtual Console. This is an interesting thing. Let me read this. Despite the fact it's written in Java, I'm going to let it off light. It was relatively easy for a teenager to fully understand all the hardware and software in computers such as the Apple II and Commodore 64. Now it has become quite hard to understand how everything works, even in a simple PC. The Virtual Console and Dev Kit emulate hardware similar to an early 80s video game console to provide a better environment to learn how to write software. This software is written in Java. Using Java allows to make it available on most operating systems and create a sandbox inside the Virtual Console which ensures the video games can't access the file system or networks on the computer. Blah, blah, blah. Video games for the Virtual Console are written using a combination of the Bean Shell scripting language and Java. Most exciting. Not for me, but most exciting anyway. So these guys basically have created a little virtual machine that you can give your aspiring programming teen or somebody else who might be interested in programming but didn't want to get in the heavy lifting of modern 3D games. This will give you the ability to experiment in a nice closed environment. I guess it's not that bad of an idea. Just don't like Java. Okay. Future pinball. Now we've been talking a little bit more about pinball lately, and those of you who are into pinball know that there's a little something on the PC called virtual pinball. Well, it looks like one of the guys responsible for that, along with some other folks, have created something called Future Pinball, the next generation in pinball simulation. Apparently, they've created a way to build these tables using almost like a CAD-like system, and of course using VBS, which is just neato. Was that sarcastic enough? Sometimes I just don't know if I come through. All models are designed with Milkshake, which of course is a free, I think it's a free 3D package, right? Anyway, so basically you can render these video playfields in real time. And they have this new physics engine called Newton, Game Dynamics engine. I'll tell you what, though, the screenshots look mad fat. So if you're at all into pinball and want to look at what maybe the future of computer pinball is going to look like, this could be it. Gotta say, some of the lighting and the reflections and all that stuff, pretty wild stuff. Anyway, so they talk about how you can use lower grade video cards to achieve good results, etc., etc. If nothing else, it's worth taking a look at if you're into pinball on the PC, and a lot of us are. Another interesting article here, Gaming of Gaffes, 2004. Let me read you this. This is pretty good. There's really funny stuff in here. I was dying. We've reached the end of another year in the video game industry, and there's still much work to do. The game companies are busy, indiscriminately flooding the holiday market with dozens of rushed and potentially buggy games. No surprise there. The fanboy video game media are racing each other to get generous reviews posted faster than the competition. That sounds really familiar, doesn't it? I couldn't have written this better myself. Could not have written this better. Fix my grammar. The video game retailers are calculating the minimum trade-in value consumers will tolerate for barely used, formerly $50 games. This is brilliant. Finally, the gamers themselves have engaged in epic flame wars across the great message board battlegrounds to determine whether Half-Life 2 or Grand Theft Auto San Andreas or Halo 2 should be Game of the Year. You can almost feel the sarcasm flowing from this next line. Indeed, it is a great time to be alive. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't choose to take part in this carnival of cupidity. Instead, it falls to me to enumerate the disappointments of the past year, to point out the sad state of this whole enterprise. Yeah, there's good stuff in here. Number one, EA means eternal agony. The driver scandal, all written in leet speak. Sony's hardware prowess. The game movie frenzy. Gran Turismo 4. Sony's deadly demo disc. Oh, man, there's just so much stuff to get enjoying on here. Bankruptcy claims acclaim. Fantastic Phantom. I mean, there's some great stuff. There's good stuff in here. You got to read this stuff. I would definitely check this out. They also have like last year's online too. Great stuff. Well, we're counting down the number of pages we have left until we talk about Electronic Arts. It's like a buildup of no one knows. Take-Two Interactive. Yes, the people behind Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, etc., apparently lost some cash this last fourth quarter. Their lower than expected fourth quarter earnings offered a weak outlook, sending shares down 3.4%. Yeah, well, of course, you know they're still selling millions and gajillions of freaking games, compliments of like Grand Theft Auto. I think it's funny, though, that when you make that much cash, you're still being called a weak outlook. How does that work out? Let's see if I can get some actual numbers here. Let's see. Still backing out a $7.5 million charge related to a proposed settlement over an SEC investigation's earning would have clocked in at $1.52 per share. When you're making money, I'm really hard pressed to say that you're having a weak outlook. But then again, I don't understand the stock market. I don't understand how when you make so much cash that you don't look good. I don't know. Perspective, I guess. What do I know? Let's see here. Oh, hey, this is kind of fun. Underground Online, UGO, my all-time favorite website ever. Get a little more sarcasm in there. Has done a Star Wars video game saga, a look at Star Wars video games. Pretty good stuff. They started like 1990, which I guess really isn't that old. It would have been nicer if they would have started a little sooner. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was going to smack all over them for that. They start with, like, say, The Empire Strikes Back in the 2600. Some good stuff in here. Remember Return of the Jedi? Nice. They have the Golden Age, Silver Age, etc., etc. It's fun to look back at some of this stuff. The Gaming Renaissance. Hell, I didn't know half this stuff existed. I played a lot of it, but could never get into, like, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Rogue Squadron, that was about the last I really got into when it came to that sort of thing. But anyway, you're into Star Wars, into classic gaming. No-brainer on that one. Now, before we get into the Electronic Arts bloodbath, we got one more thing to talk about. And, you know, this is one of these things I just can't get enough of. If you go to this site, it's called Magic Pinball. This is a shockwave-based pinball game that is a complete ad for technology, namely the company's motherboard and the AMD processor. Unbelievable. Instead of getting cool like dot matrix displays, you get ads. You get to play pinball to watch ads. This is beyond funny. I mean, the first ramp you go up, you get an ad. This is great stuff. I mean, you can't you can't pay people to come up with this stuff. Satan has to come up with stuff like this. Play pinball to watch ads. Just unbelievable. Anyway, so you'll want to check that out. You'll be mildly entertained for a while until you realize that you're playing a game to watch ads. Now, enough of that. Let's talk about Electronic Arts. I've only been an hour at this, and I haven't even got to Electronic Arts yet. Yes, we all know about Electronic Arts. We all know that they now own the NFL. You will not play, for the next 5 years, any game with licensed NFL characters that Electronic Arts does not own. Now, if you were thinking straight, which Electronic Arts has obviously lost their freaking minds, if everybody, including the spouses of your own employees, were coming down on you, what would you do for about 6 to 8 months? You just bought the NFL, right? Everybody's pissed at you. You're having bad company relations because of the spouses are saying that you're sweatshopping their husbands or their wives. So what do? You slide under the radar for a while, right? Yeah. You slide down, you be quiet, you lay low, you send out a couple of press announcements, some free t-shirts to some of the sites that talk good about you, and you move on. And then, in about a year, right, you pop back up and greedily embezzle some other company. But they didn't do that. So instead of being happy with owning the NFL, they went out to snag the NBA, which apparently turned them down. I'm going to give you a link. But the NBA wasn't the only thing that Electronic Arts went after. I'm going to give you a couple links, actually, to the NBA stuff, because there's some good weblog stuff about that. EA also went after Digital Illusions, makers of the popular Battlefield series. They went after them. And the Digital Illusions shareholders turned EA down. Unbelievable, right? I mean, Electronic Arts is going on a buying rampage. You'd think that they would, kick it for a while, right? Not to be. They went after Ubisoft. Trying to get in on their action, right? I can't get my hands around that, right? There's another NFL article, Battle for the NFL. This is an interesting article there too. Another discussion about Electronic Arts, challenge everything, so says the childlike voice with an undertone of awe in game intros. But a look at the publisher's sequel-heavy lineup and 9-month development quick hitters shows it might do a great deal of good for the industry to challenge itself more. Yeah, there's some good stuff in here. That's from GamePro.com. And finally, we have a Slashdot article speaking mostly about the same thing. We'll give you a link. But, it truly stuns me when a company not only openly shows its behavior, but then continues to do it after the fact. You know what's even more funny is, and I'm sure I've got a link to it here somewhere, but I must have closed it. where EA put out a counter to the spouse letter. Apparently it was classic. I wish I'd have dug it up. Maybe I'll read it on next month's show. But apparently it was pretty much hook, line, sinker of BS, which no surprise there. But I wish I'd have had that handy to talk to you about it. But, what's funny is, I said this on the last show, but I'm going to just bring it up one last time because I like to gloat when I write. Not that it doesn't happen a lot, but, still, got to get my barbs in when I can. These companies are trying to assimilate. Oh, yeah, Digital Illusions turned them down, and Ubisoft got out fairly unscathed. But they're going to continue to go after other companies. Now, the only good thing in the video gaming industry is that EA doesn't have a monopoly to back their vicious, vicarious decisions to go out and munch down companies. Microsoft has the power to heavy-hand companies into doing what they want, right, because of their monopoly. But EA doesn't have that, other than now they have the NFL, right? If you ever want to make an NFL game or license NFL game again, you need to come work for us. But there's a lot of other games that you can make that aren't NFL-based. A lot of companies won't have that option. So it's a scary thing, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I did realize, I'm going to cut this EA thing a little bit short. I could talk hours about Electronic Arts and the great evil of companies, but instead, we're going to end Bits and Bytes with another little freebie I told you about earlier, and I forgot where I put the link, and I wanted to make sure you guys got it, because for some reason, the Dizzy games drive people crazy. Everybody loves the Dizzy games. I don't get it. Never did get it. Won't get it. I've tried it. Don't get it. So apparently you can now download from Codemasters, the original producers of Treasure Island Dizzy. You can go and download for free the Commodore 64 version of Treasure Island Dizzy. So yet another freebie this month on Retro Gaming Radio. Remember when, those of you who went way back, do you remember when, I think it was it Game Pro? Somebody was basically going out leeching MAME ROMs, leeching MAME from other companies and sites, and actually taking all their intellectual stuff and putting it on their page and telling the visitors how lucky they were to have them to provide this to them. Do you guys remember that? It was Game Somebody or another. Look, we've provided you with 50 more free games. I mean, they were dumping ROMs online, publicly, saying, look how good we are. Look what we've done for you. We've given you 50 more games. They didn't write MAME. They don't own any of the intellectual property. I mean, they were basically publicly waresing video games all the time, patting themselves on the back. It was great stuff. I wish I still had access to some of that stuff. Actually, I think it's on one of the episodes. If any of you have been recently listening to some of the old episodes and remember which one that's on, I'd love to go back and hear that clip. I'd air that one about how these guys were basically taking claim for MAME and all the games. Too funny. But anyway, well, now that I've ran Bits and Bytes ungodly amounts of time this month, it's a new year. Got to have a big Bits and Bytes. Big show. I'm going to sign off from Bits and Bytes. That's amazing. Again, thanks to all of our regulars that wrote in. Gary Corcoran, Dana Eiler. We had some other new folks that sent some good stuff in. I want to make sure that everybody gets proper recognition. Fernando Garcia sent some goodies in. Who else do we get in here? Let's see. Ooh, Jason E. Let's see, who else? James Joel. Ashley Boris. And I'm sure I missed people. Christian Egler. Tons of people wrote in. I don't have time to address everybody, but you guys know who you are. Alex Roberts, that was just another one that popped up. You guys know who you are, and we do appreciate all the submissions. Keep them coming. We'll talk about them right here on Bits and Bytes on Retro Gaming Radio. And this month we have a new guest on Retro Gaming Radio, Mr. Ed Logg. Ed Logg was the man responsible for some of the great games like Gauntlet, Gauntlet 2, Xybots, Steel Talon. He did some stuff like Super Breakout, Video Pinball, all sorts of good stuff. Without further ado, here is the man himself, Ed Logg.
This is Shane Monroe at the Classic Gaming Expo 2004 in San Jose, California. I'm here with the legend Ed Logg. Ed, it is so great that you managed to stop by here and give us a little bit of your time. We're going to talk a little bit about your time at Atari, the video games you've made, and go from there.
Okay.
Just for the folks who don't know your name, don't know the name Ed Logg, give us a little background, your claim to fame, why you're here today.
Oh boy, I've done so many games. I'll probably list off some of the more infamous ones: the Super Breakout, Asteroids, Centipede, Millipede, Gauntlet 2, Xybots, Space Lords, Steel Palins. I did and then I switched over to doing some consumer stuff. I actually did an Othello VCS cart way back whenever on the slide, and I did consumer games. The Rush series on the Nintendo 64, the Rush 2049 on Dreamcast, and things like that. Dr. Muto was the last console game I did, and I'm currently doing cell phone games.
Now let's talk about that real quick. The cell phone games, you're working with a startup company.
That's correct. I was one of the founders of a startup company called GenPlay.
And people can see that at genplay.com.
That's
they can
correct.
see what you guys are up to.
Yep.
And do you have games in production now?
We're just releasing 3 of our games to Verizon, and at least one of the games is on Sprint. The others are following on Sprint shortly.
So if they have the service, it doesn't necessarily matter what phone they have to get those? How does that work out?
There are many phones for each of the carriers, and basically, I'm going to talk about Brew right now, because the games that, I certainly did 2 of the 3 games I worked on in Brew. They work on basically every handset.
So it's like Java-based stuff?
No, Brew is a C++ type language.
Gotcha.
And it's done by Qualcomm.
Okay.
Verizon is the largest Brew carrier in the U.S.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, you had a lot of time at Atari, obviously, after putting forward all those games.
I started in 1978. I actually pulled out my original badge, March 6th, 1978.
Wow.
And I went through and I left for about a year and a half to go work at EA. And then I came back doing contract work for them. I did the Wayne Gretzky 3D hockey port to the Nintendo 64, and then, Rush 20, San Francisco Rush, and then Rush 2, and then Rush 2049.
So tell us what it was like the early years at Atari. There's so many stories floating around. Howard Scott Warshaw has numerous DVDs out chronicling the history of Atari. What was it like from your point of view to be at Atari in those early years?
For me, it was fantastic because I've been doing games all my life. It was the first time I actually got paid to get in trouble, as it were, because I got in trouble many times for doing games on the side and, after hours and stuff like that. Well, I had a job at TRW one summer, and I was doing some things running jobs overnight to, basically games, and I was reprimanded for that. Don't do that kind of stuff.
Wow. You think they'd encourage you to work on your off time?
No, not TRW. They're government, and so their time's precious.
So just to kind of chronicle, who were you working with at Atari when you started in '78? Who were the players?
I joined a group was run by Dave Steuben. Mike Alba was working on football at the time. I took over for Dennis Coble, who went on to do many other, games. So you can probably hear about all the stuff he's done. So I took over from him. He was working on a game called Dirt Bike. But the first game that I published at that point was Super Breakout, and I actually did it at the same time I was doing Dirt Bike on the same hardware.
And that was coin-op.
This is all arcade coin-op.
Arcade 20?
Arcade coin-op.
Oh, arcade coin-ops. Gotcha. And so you started off with that. Now you were strictly programmer at this point, right?
Yeah, I was programmer, and then I guess what you call project leader.
Okay.
Shortly thereafter.
Okay. And as a project leader, did you still get to work on the games yourself, or were you spent doing the project management role?
Well, there's not much project management. There's me as programmer, me as artist, me as audio, me as project leader. So it's pretty easy to manage that programmer.
Yeah, that's true. So after you left Atari, you went. Where did you go after that?
That was in 1994 or something.
So you were there quite a while.
Yeah, I was almost 17 years.
Wow.
Before I went off to EA for about a year and a half.
Everybody talks about the beginning of Atari. How about talking about it when it was at that point in time? How was it like just before you left?
Well, let me take you back a little bit, because when I started in '78, the industry was okay, and then once we did things like Asteroids and Space Invaders came in, and Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and Centipede hit, and the industry was really at its prime then. It was 1981 or so. Then it started this slowly go downhill, and you have to understand too, in that industry there was really no competition. There were no PCs to speak of, even though there were Altairs and your own personal computer just getting started. And there were mainframes, which weren't really competition at all. But there was really nothing that was competing. So anything you could do was obviously better than nothing, and it's certainly better than the VCS.
Sure.
So, we really ruled the roost for a long time. Now, once personal computers came in, and then, Atari 800 and family computers, the NES and stuff like that came in, we actually had serious competition.
Now, what did Atari do? Because you were there, obviously, during the video game crash era. What was Atari doing during that crash period while you were there?
Well, the traditional business thing, they were laying people off. And what preceded that, of course, is they were going through upper management, because obviously they think, well, if something's wrong, obviously somebody's mismanaging.
So wait a minute, so you're saying that during the layoff periods, unlike the dot-com boom where they laid everybody off but the upper echelon who were waiting to cash in on their golden parachute, back then they were actually laying off the top of the pyramid.
No, they didn't lay off the top. They just rotated people. Well, maybe you're not doing it. Let's give it to somebody else.
Okay. So they were laying off the programmers.
Yeah, they were laying off programmers. Artists. They were cutting back. This was 1984 was a real big one, but I think we had another smaller one in 82 or so, or more through attrition than anything else. But I think 84 was a real big one.
And what kept the company afloat during those years? I mean, that was really bad for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. We had a lot of people that I'd worked on, Asteroids and the other games with. A lot of people, left through attrition, of course.
Sure.
But it was a real sad time for us, to see all these people go. We were over in Milpitas, 1501 on Sycamore, I believe, at the time. And it was shortly thereafter that Tramiel took over, and he didn't want the coin-op group, fortunately. Otherwise, Atari coin-op would have been history right then and there.
Sure.
So, Namco ended up getting like 51% of Atari coin-op.
And now, while you were at Atari, did you only do coin-op stuff at Atari?
As I said, I did a VCS cartridge sort of on the side.
Yeah, fellow.
Yes, and that was something I did at home. It was just I wanted to try something, and my boss came in one day as I was releasing ROMs. I was testing on what's called black box. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on a VCS game." Why don't you stop that right now?
Wow.
So, but I was done, at that point.
So you were doing that at home on the side?
Yeah, I was doing that at home and, late evenings and coming back in and finishing stuff up.
So you actually had that kind of equipment at home that you could...
No, actually I had I don't remember what I had at home. I built a small computer at one point in late 77, which, probably got me more interested in stuff like this. But I had something at home. I was probably using something I shouldn't talk about.
Oh, please do tell.
It was some government system that I was testing my code on.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, give it an idea for the people who are coding in .NET right now. Explain to them what coding was for you.
All right, let's take it back to 1978. How did we do stuff? Well, it worked like this. I wrote off my code in a piece of paper. I handed it to a gal who entered it in on a PDP 10, 11, 8 something. And she gave me back a paper tape and a printed listing. So I ran the paper tape through what's called our black box, which loaded it into memory, and that memory simulated the EEPROMs that would be on the board. And there was actually a cable that ran over and plugged into the processor on the board. Now, when you debug that, and basically when you debug, it's like if you find an error, you had two choices. You could write it on the paper and hand it to the gals, get another paper tape in an hour or so, or you could patch memory, which is what we typically did.
How did that work out?
Well, you just enter, the black box had commands that says you just type in hexadecimal digits, and I knew the 6502, opcodes by heart by that point. So you entered in and basically jumped to the code and then jumped back.
Oh, so you basically just did a subroutine to jump around the bug to fix it while you were debugging.
And then you tested that, and of course you wrote it on a piece of paper.
Sure.
It worked, then you submitted that off for your next revision.
Those
so you basically
real days.
debugged that way, and then you wrote a bunch of new code and submitted it and got a new version. But of course there's a lag time between that.
Sure.
And, what I did at that point was I actually started another game, Super Breakout, while I was currently working on my first one.
Now, were you a hardware developer as well, or did they provide you with hardware and you coded for it?
I was not a hardware engineer. Even though I'd done some TTL type stuff, I'm not a hardware engineer by any means. And that was done by the engineer Dave Steuben. We had technicians who actually maintained the hardware, debugged it. I was on the phone with my wife one day, and I looked over and pop, and there's this capacitor that was basically sizzling and melting on the board. I said, "Excuse me,
Gotta go."
Turn the power off. They'd obviously put the capacitor in backwards, and it just died and melted right then and there.
So how did they get you up to speed on coding on this stuff? I mean, this was
1978.
Z80? This was Z80 code, right?
No, it was
Assembler?
actually 6502.
Oh,
assembly.
6502 back
It's
then.
all assembly.
Okay. So you came from that background, or did they train you?
No, actually, what I did, I was interviewed, and they accepted me. I was interviewed by Mike Alba, actually, Dr. Bizarro, as we used to call him. But I called up and said, "Why don't you give me the 6502 book?" And Mike said, "You really don't have to have it now." And I said, "I want to see it, man." So he gave me the assembly language, the manual that basically described the processor. And the 2 weeks before I came, I learned the microprocessor.
Now, for those of my listeners who haven't been around for a while, this is maybe their first show. Explain to them how much memory and the sort of system limitations you had to work with in these early days.
Okay. To the best of my recollection, there was probably 256 bytes of memories, maybe 120. Well, the VCS had 128. On our coin-op hardware, we probably had 256. That means the stack shared the same memory as the 0 page, which is the privileged memory on a 6502. If we were lucky, we had 2 pages of memory, which would be 512 bytes.
Now, this is bytes, folks, not megabytes.
No, this is
not
bytes.
gigabytes.
Not even kilobytes.
That's not even kilobytes.
Not kilobytes,
Bytes.
we're talking bytes. So we probably had 256 bytes on our early coin-op hardware. Our programs were probably 2K, maybe 3, at the most 4K.
That's more. Most people write email bigger than that.
That's right, yeah. Most email programs are bigger than that. Certainly a Microsoft Word, even containing nothing. is
Containing
almost
nothing.
that
Hello
big.
World would be 25K at least. Okay, so throughout your tenure programming, you also moved on to consoles.
Yes.
And did you do home computer stuff too? I didn't hear that mentioned.
No, I did not. I did
Managed
not work
to
on
slide out of that.
5200. I did not work on the Atari 800, although I had one at home at one point.
Well, if you were doing 6502, it would seemingly make sense that you do, say, the 400, 800, and the Commodore 64, things like that.
Actually, I take that back. I did do some programming on the 400, 800 because the BASIC on that had no renumber. And when you're doing BASIC coding, you have to give
Sure.
line numbers, and a lot of times you get to a certain point and you
realize you got to put more line numbers in
you
there.
can't put any more line numbers in. So there was a chunk of memory that was not being used in the OS. I wrote a renumbered routine right in the middle of that. So yeah, I did things like that.
So you didn't actually write full game.
No,
put it
not
out
at all.
So, and your VCS game was Othello. And what made you choose Othello?
I was just enamored in the game, and not only that, I had this idea that I didn't have to do search ahead. The standard alpha beta pruning. I had an idea that I could do it without ever searching. Now, on a VCS, you only had 128 bytes of memory, and some of those bytes are taken up with specific stuff for the hardware and the stack, so you have very little memory. So I couldn't do any, alpha beta pruning, and actually you can't even do any thinking except during vertical retrace on the VCS. It's pretty bad.
Interesting.
So I had this algorithm. I thought I could do it just pattern matching on the board, and so that's why the program started.
Gotcha. Now you've done a lot of really modern stuff. I mean, we're talking Dreamcast, N64,
PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube.
So you have developed on even this generation of consoles.
Dr. Muto was the last game I did.
Dr.
It was
Muto,
on all
okay,
three.
I did play that on
It
them.
was Christmas 2003, I think.
Right. So let's take a little progression. Let's jump out of the coin-op. Let's move forward a little bit. And did you work on NES after '84?
I did stuff in NES probably around. Actually, let's put it this way. I did family computer work before there was an NES in the U.S.
Okay.
because we were owned by Namco at that time.
Gotcha.
And I had actually done a Centipede Millipede version on the family computer. And then I found out actually Atari Corp had to sue Atari Games Corp had to sue Atari Corp because we didn't know who owned the rights to Centipede, for example. So the coin-op who actually designed and originally produced the game had to actually sue it. That's because Time Warner screwed up the contract and it was unclear. And the judge basically threw up a hand and said, well, Atari Corp owns the rights in consumer, you own the rights in coin-op. And so that was the final decision.
Nice.
So at that point, we couldn't do Centipede. We had to, basically license it from Tramiel.
Is that why you guys skipped over to Millipede for the Nintendo?
And so we skipped over it. But shortly thereafter, I saw a game called Tetris on the Atari 800 or something like that. And I went to our legal counsel and said, you got to license this game for the family computer, and before NES came out. And at that point, I'd actually did the programming for the for Tengen, which was our consumer group.
Yeah, we're big fans of them.
We couldn't use the name Atari in the consumer group because Atari Corp owned the rights for that.
Oh, geez.
So we had to rename our consumer group Tengen.
Wow, that's a bonus. We didn't even know he was involved in Tengen.
Does Tengen mean anything?
Yes, and I forget what it means. It's not like Sentei or Atari, which are games from the word of Go, but it has a Japanese meaning that I forget right now. But in any case, I had done Tetris, and then the FC came out about that time, so we had actually shown it at CES, fall CES, and then the management came back and said, we want some changes. We want to color improve graphics. And I didn't think I could do it, but I finally found a way to do it. So we've shown it like in January CES in Vegas or something like that, and we released the game shortly thereafter. And then it was a month or so later that Nintendo came in and said, oh, we own the rights to entertainment systems, and that includes the family computer, which is not a computer really, it's an entertainment system.
Right.
So they basically bought the right, they invented and bought the rights for a new category of game, and so, we sued them, they sued us, and met the court. And
everybody was suing everybody back then, weren't they?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because there was a summary judgment like a day before we were to start trial, and this is really unheard of. Wow. And not only that, she'd turned it down before.
Wow.
And it really, I'd gone to other lawyers and they said, oh, you work at Atari? I saw this, crazy thing, the Judge Smith or whatever did, and she said, what was going on there? And all I could do was give them my side of the story. And I threw up my hands because it was a mystery, total mystery to us too. Summary judgments basically mean I'm going to make a ruling before we have a trial because basically it's clear what the judgment's going to be.
Wow.
And it's like, whoa.
I assume that was not in your favor.
No, it was not. Nintendo got the rights to Tetris, and we were supposed to destroy all our cartridges.
But there was a release of Tengen version of Tetris.
It was already out.
Yeah, it was already out. It's a collector's item now.
And so what happened is we had to recall whatever was there and destroy whatever we had. But unfortunately, you'll see on, if you go back on eBay and stuff like that, they were selling them for like $200, $150, $200. And I'm sure they were only like $29 at the time.
And that's not the only case. I mean, since you were Tengen. I always thought it was Tengen too. I'm going to be saying that all day now. There were a couple of different titles that went through that dual release thing, weren't there?
Tetris is the only one that I know.
Was the only one. But I know there were. I mean, those are always the prize ones. My wife, in fact, she's a big Tetris fan. When I tell her that I met the guy that basically did it, she's going to love this. And that's like her favorite version of Tetris.
Yeah, see, I didn't do Tetris. I mean, all I did was license it and redo it.
Oh, you licensed? Okay.
Yeah, we licensed it. It was done by a Russian.
Well, I mean, not the original game, but I mean, you did the NES.
I did the original NES FC version.
And that's the only one she'll play. You can put any version of Tetris in front of her.
Because they had two-player simultaneous, and it had all the things that none of the other versions of Tetris had. And it also looked better, and played better, too.
I kind of looked at you guys as sort of like the Activision of the NES, because NES was putting out all this stuff.
I prefer to think of it as the Atari, okay?
No.
Not the consumer Atari, the coin-op Atari.
Fair enough. So after the NES, you moved on and started working with the next generation consoles after that. Did you have any, did you work at all on the other console at the time? The ColecoVisions, the Intellivisions?
I did not do anything on the Apples. I did not do anything Coleco and Intellivision, nor even on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Why the skip in that generation?
Well, first of all, I was doing coin-op stuff.
Oh, you're still doing coin-op
stuff? I did
Tetris
simply as I can do this real quick and prove to you guys and how good I can make it. And so I did that while I was more or less working on other things.
So you're definitely a coin-op guy. I mean, that's your passion.
Right up until '94. Yeah.
And what was the last coin-op that you worked on?
I was working on a game that never got released, and I was really concerned about Atari Games hardware at that point.
Oh, sure.
We're not seeing any advances on hardware, since basically Gauntlet days, shortly thereafter with the growth hardware.
And what was that game?
Well, Space Lords was the last growth hardware.
And that was the one that had like multiple player sides.
Yeah, there was 4 players, 2 monitors, 2 setups.
Sure.
That was a very interesting game. It was the only game I'd ever done where you could earn $1,500 in one arcade and almost nothing in another. It was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Sure. Now, during your coin-op tenure, there were a couple of really big titles that really stand out, and I know my listeners wanted to talk about that. Let's talk about Asteroids. I like to ask all the classic game programmers when they sit down, did you know
I mean, other than the fact that you loved your job and you were doing what you wanted to do, et cetera, did you know at that point in time that what you did was going to be knocked off, rehashed, and become this phenomenon?
No.
Did you? I mean, there was no magic spark where you're sitting there going, saying, "This is it."
From the beginning, the answer is no. But there was points, when I was working a game and we actually had this little 3x3 inch vector board where we had our 5 controls. So you play with 5 controls that were about the size of a keypad on a phone, and it was clear because I'd go home, I'd get to be working in the evening, and people come over and say, "Are you done yet? Can I play the game?" And that's usually the first sign when people are asking you to please get up, stop work so they can play the game. Or if you come back in the morning and the high score's, filled, and it's like, okay, people have been playing this.
Were you the gentleman responsible for the Battlezone volcano?
No, that's
who was that? I know.
Owen Rubin did the volcano for Ed Logg.
Okay, that's what it was. I knew that he was working with somebody, and I was just thinking about that when you were talking about the vector board. The original ROM set of Asteroids had the infamous score bug. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
You mean the lurking strategy?
Yeah. Where you could basically hide under the score.
Oh, well, you can actually do it in any of the corners. Actually, you don't even have to be in the corners. You can be on either side.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason, let me give you a little history on that.
Yes, please.
Because when I first did the game, a lot of times the monitors are not registered properly. So sometimes the edge is off the end of the monitor, so you actually can't see it. So you have to allow for the fact that the operators are not going to align the monitor properly. And plus, the monitors grow or shrink with the heat, as they get warm. And so if a saucer came in, and it was initially this way, saucer came in and would take a shot right away, and if you happened to be near the edge, you'd get shot by something that you never even saw. You could hear it, and then bang, you're dead. So we felt that was unfair. So I gave him, a couple seconds before I took my first shot, and make sure he was on the screen, and you heard him and had a chance to react and do something. So that's precipitated it. And I actually had tried lurking before that, and I probably tried lurking before, I had done that fix, because that fix came very late in the testing process. So I probably tried lurking when the saucer would shoot immediately. Right. And I tell you, if the saucer shot right away, you were dead. You can't lurk, because he would come in and nail you because you'd be right in his face. You'd be point blank range.
What was the inspiration for Asteroids? You can trace so many games back to Asteroids now.
Yeah.
But somebody had to come up with it to begin with. Where did that come from?
Well, let me give you a little history there. The game idea is not mine. Lyle Raines, who was my boss at the time, called me into his office and said, "I got this idea for a game." And the idea came from a game I think called Cosmo, which had big planet in the middle. It was, basically a ship flying around, but people kept shooting the big rocks and hoped to shoot, destroy the big rocks. So his idea was, I wanted to shoot the big rocks and blow them up. And he thought this would be a good idea. And I told him, I agreed too. But what I'd like to see is blow the rocks into pieces, smaller and smaller pieces. He wanted me to do it on a raster screen, and I told him, no, I want to do it on XY because the rotation of the ships are very important. You want to know where you're aiming. That's the only way you can tell. And on the vector monitors, they're 4 times the resolution. They're 1,024 pixels wide by 768 tall. And we're used to 320 wide by 220 tall. So this is much more resolution. When I can draw a ship, I can rotate it. It'll look exactly like it should. It's aimed in the right direction and all that.
There were so many people at the time that said that the vector graphics just weren't, what's the word I'm looking for here, inspired enough. They weren't compelling.
Well, first of all, they're black and white. They're line drawings.
Right.
And so, yes, by our standards these days, they were certainly.
Well, I'm going to tell you, even back then, when you were looking at what were the other games right at that
era. First of all, you have to understand everything. There were no color monitors back then because they were so high priced that you didn't do color games. What you did was black and white games, and you put an overlay, a colored acetate overlay on top of them to get color. And of course, they never registered. So I get questions like, "How come I have 3 red rows of bricks?" and other monitors only have 2 red rows of bricks? And the answer is, well, you didn't adjust the acetate overlay right.
So, just while we're on the topic of the vector raster thing, what do you prefer working on and why?
I actually preferred working on the vector monitors for some games. Centipede is much better off in a color raster type setup. It's more ideal suited for that. But anything that needs fine resolution like that, and where outlines will do fine, that was the way to go. And you asked earlier too about some of the inspiration for asteroids, and I'd have to go back to Space War, and I'm not referring to the Russell version that was a coin-op game. I'm referring to the version that was actually done probably at MIT, and I saw up in the artificial intelligence lab, where they played it on the PDP-11s with these handmade, controller buttons.
Well, it was like a straight hat tip of that, right?
It was a straight rip-off of it, sure. And I'm not sure if it's even the same code for that matter, because I also saw it in the Stanford Forum in 1971 or 2, actually being played on 2 PDP-8s against each other. It was coin-operated. You had to insert coins to play.
Right.
So to me, that was the first coin-operated game.
That was the one that had all the numeric keypad in the middle where you could change gravities and.
Yeah, well, no, that was the coin arcade one that came later.
Oh, okay.
This was a PD8, which is totally different.
Okay.
2 PDP-8s playing each other.
Wild.
So this was in 71, 72, long before Pong, long before any of the other coin-op hardwares, and it was coin-op based. And it was in my mind, it was the first video coin-op game.
What do you think of how Asteroids has progressed through the years? I mean, I'm sure you're still in the industry, so I mean, it's not like you're looking back 20 years, but Asteroids has been spawned off. What would you say is, choose a platform and the best version of, it doesn't have to be Asteroids, but Asteroids-inspired game. What would you say your favorite would be?
Well, I'm going to be very biased. I haven't played another Asteroids-like game that's been as good. I mean, there are things like Star Castle. I love Star Castle. And, to me, that was somewhat inspired by Asteroids. And, Rip-Off was another game as a 2-player game. It was the most fun 2-player game I've ever played in my life.
Like Space Duel. Opinions on Space Duel.
Yeah, I find it's very esoteric for me, and I think for a lot of people, you look at it, it's like, what is this? And there are things like the mines, which I almost felt were unfair and actually detrimental to the gameplay.
I like, say, Blastroids.
Yeah, it's a raster version of Asteroids, with some other gimmicks thrown in. And I think people view it and they say, nice game, but it's still not as good as the original.
Tell us about Asteroids Deluxe. Were you on board with that?
I was not. Dave Shepard did that game. I think I was working on something else, maybe even Centipede. I was promoted to supervisor after Asteroids. And
hands off the keyboard for a while?
Well, yes, unfortunately, way too much.
That happens a lot, I think.
Unfortunately, yes, Peter Principle set in, and it was obvious to me that I was well beyond what I was competent at. So in 1981, before Centipede launched, I resigned and said, this is not going to work. It doesn't help you guys, and it's not fun for me.
Sure.
So I went back to programming.
Have you ever seen this is again another knockoff, I'm just curious your opinion of it because I was a big fan of the game. You seen a game called Stardust or Super Stardust?
No, I don't think I have. What platform?
It came out on the PC eventually. It was also on the Commodore Amiga. That's I think where it was originated from. It was from Team 17 over in the UK. It was like a 3D ray traced version of Asteroids. It still looks good today. You can hold it up to anything today and it still looks great.
No, I had not actually.
And you had not seen that. Interesting. I was hoping you could comment on that. We talked a lot about Centipede just now. Let's move over there. We'll leave Asteroids. We'll move over to Centipede. Give us some history of Centipede.
Centipede is not a game idea that I came up with. I was looking through a list. We have brainstorming every year, and I have a brainstorming list that comes out of it of game ideas that people proposed. And one of them was called a game called Bug Shooter. And I actually drug up the original description of it, and it basically is you're shooting bugs. And that was pretty much the summarize of it. So the rest of it, I'd also hired a new programmer called Donna Bailey, and I need to give her a project. So this is what I picked out for her to do. And so I had done, some of the preliminary work. I set up the Centipede, and I told her what I expected.
So she didn't actually design the game, she coded it?
She coded it, yes.
Okay.
The design came from me, and I'm sure she made contributions along the way that I've forgotten long ago.
A lot of people attribute Centipede to being one of the earlier female-friendly games.
Yeah.
Do you feel that was because it had a female coder? Do you think?
I could make guesses either way. Being the first female game, whether it had to do with being a female programmer, and your guess is as good as mine on that.
You guys didn't do like marketing research and things like that before you released it?
I don't have the no. We do marketing surveys, but it's done differently than what you'd expect.
Sure.
We have what's called a field test, where you take it to an arcade, you put it there,
you see what happens.
The owner gets all the money, and he tells you how much money it earns and how much other games in the arcade are.
Oh, okay.
So we can walk into there and see people playing the game. And that's, to me, the best advantage. You walk in and see people, like in Asteroids, for example.
Right.
You watch a guy put it in and die in 15 seconds or less. But he pulled another quarter out and stuck it in again. So that tells me immediately this guy felt, I screwed up. The game's not screwing me, or it's not too hard.
Right.
I just screwed up. It still looks interesting. I want to play it again. And that's what you look for in a good game, is people will play and say, oh, man, I screwed up. I need to do this again because I know I can do better. But if you go in and play a game and it's like, God, the computer just killed me and I have no idea, what I can do better. I'm just going to walk.
Now, did Centipede was originally conceived and designed around the trackball concept, or did that sort of just come in later?
No, I put the trackball in extremely early. The reason for that is I started the idea of a trackball early because I needed to get the shooter from one side of the screen to the other screen quickly, and I also needed to be able to basically get that motion, get up, out, away, and I needed best variable speed and variable direction, and trackball is the only way to do that. I'd actually seen a mouse-like controller up at the Xerox Research Lab in 1972. So I, had some idea, and we also had a trackball and football. And that was the only way, it was clear to me that was the only way it was going to be able to work. As a joystick, it was never going to work. And yes, I'm sure at some point marketing asked me, can you put a joystick on it? And my answer was no.
Because the trackball was really pricey, right? Back then?
It wasn't pricey. It was, it really was not bad at all.
Really?
No.
Why the hell is it so damn expensive now?
I don't know.
It's weird.
Compared to what?
Well, like if you go out and buy like an arcade controller to put on your computer, the trackball is always a huge premium. If you go to like Hap Controls that supply all the trackballs, like $120.
Do this for me.
Bucks.
Turn your mouse upside down and play with the ball.
Well, you can't.
Why not?
Because the ball has to be sitting on rollers. If you turn it upside down, the ball falls off the rollers.
No, actually it doesn't. It falls onto the rollers.
Does it?
Yes, because when you press down on the mouse, you actually push.
Okay.
You push it, and that's basically that's all a trackball is an upside down mouse. If you look inside of it, there's three contact points, same as a trackball.
Of course, you know what? My optical mouse doesn't have a ball anymore.
No, but I'm talking about the old traditional ones. Yeah.
Old school days. So they weren't very pricey. So it wasn't a cost prohibitive thing for you to do that.
No, it was not. And considering we sell arcade pieces for $2,000, let's say. And we can if it's $50 control, that's only $50 out of the $200. It's the $2,000 we're taking. So
that's not bad. So you were really into choosing the right control for the game.
Absolutely.
And that game just simply wouldn't have worked with a joystick.
No.
How do you feel about this? Is just this is more of a philosophical thing. We like to segue into these. Centipede got ported to everything with a joystick. Does that bother you when you see something that you've created? And let's be honest, you can't play Centipede with a joystick. You can't.
Well, you can play it. You can't play it well, and it's not the same game because it's not as fun.
Does it bother you to see games? I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Altered to fit your screen, so to speak.
Well, the answer is yes and no. The answer is no because I understand the limitations of the media. If you go to a VCS, you have you probably don't have any alternative.
Right.
And yes, they could have built a special controller for it, but it's probably not going to happen. So from that standpoint of the medium, yes, that's their limitations. They'll have to do the best they can. The part that I have a problem with is a lot of times they have the tools to make it a better game and they don't, and that's what I objected to. They didn't get the details right. When things happen or the number of pieces and stuff like that, it really affects gameplay. And quite honestly, there is a crossover. People will say that, oh yeah, I played Centipede and I really didn't like it. They're not referring to the coin-op one, they're referring to the VCS version or something.
Right. That wasn't a very fun version.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
But I mean, that's what happens. And so you really need to take all the effort to make a quality product on any platform. And yes, there are sometimes limitations, but more importantly, you need to be able to do the best with limitations you have. So even though it's limited to a joystick, you can do a better job with the joystick. You may have to slow the pieces down, or you may have to do something compensate for it.
So there are a lot of times we talk about if you can't do it right, don't do it at all, right? And I'm curious how people who are actually owners of properties feel about. It's for a good example. Game Boy Advance released Activision Anthology, which had several of the big popular Activision titles. One of them was Pitfall, and anybody who played Pitfall more than twice knows that the version that's on the Game Boy Advance runs like 20% slower. I mean, the jumps that you regularly had timed on the VCS, gone. And to us, we felt like, why include it if you can't include it right?
Yeah. And this is exactly what I'm referring to. I mean, that's the kind of stuff they can fix. There was no excuse for it.
They said that they couldn't get it fast enough on the Game Boy Advance. They said that they did all the custom programming tricks that they could, and there was nothing they could do to make it any faster.
And the answer is, that's hogwash.
I can't wait to go right in back.
And let me explain why. Let's say if you move 1 pixel a frame.
Right.
And it would normally, you run around 60 hertz, but you can't run 60 hertz on let's say a Game Boy. So what you do is you don't move 1 pixel at a time. You run 30 hertz and move 2 pixels at a time. It still takes the same amount of time to get point A to point B.
Sure.
Game's the same. Yes, it's a little jerkier, but the gameplay is the same. That's how you solve the situations.
So, like frame skipping is basically what you're talking about doing.
You can't run it at 60 hertz? Okay, don't. Run it at 30 and double all the speeds up.
So why would you feel that somebody would do that?
Because a lot of time it's marketing driven. In other words, I'll give you an example in Atari. And we had the exact same situation in the early days. The consumer division said, "You coin op as the title, thank you, we'll go do it." And they will release it. They never asked me, would you play this game and see what it's like? And that eventually happened because I had to raise enough of a stink saying, you guys are butchering these.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I eventually got to see some of the 5200 version of some of the games, and I had to comment that, this is too fast, too slow. You don't have this right. The algorithm's not right. Look in the original code.
Right, absolutely.
It's the same 6502, man. You guys can use the same code.
And did that happen a lot?
Yep, constantly. And I mean, it still happens today.
Oh, I mean, of course, absolutely.
They take the license and they hand it to a program and say, do the best you can, and I want it in 3 days, and it has to, and I'm going to ship it out tomorrow. It's like, well, okay, you're going to get a piece of crap.
Tell me that pisses you off, please. Tell me that it drives you absolutely bonkers. What about, while we're on the subject, we're going to get back to the coin ops. I know we're totally segueing here. We'll get back to the coin ops in a minute because I want to talk about that too. But how do you feel about what we call name whoring? In other words, you take a property like Spy Hunter and you turn it into a totally different game. It has nothing to do with the original. Or Galaga Destination Earth. How do you feel about it? Would that bother you if somebody took Centipede and completely turned it into a first-person shooter?
Oh, well, they did that already.
No, they didn't. The Hasbro version of Centipede was okay.
No, it was not. Not
the adventure version, but the isometric view was okay.
I actually was part of the reviews, and some people came in and actually posed this to Atari, and I told management it would not work. It would not be a Centipede, because the information on Centipede is you have perfect information. You see the screen, you see everything.
Right.
The version they have in first person, you don't get total information. You get lost information. Guys coming from the side you can't see. And so the gameplay has to be totally different.
Right.
It will not be as fun.
Right. But you didn't have control of that because you didn't own Centipede, right? So they just went.
No, management would simply make a deal.
Damn it, that pisses me off.
Sometimes they would ask me, and sometimes they'd listen, sometimes they wouldn't. But a lot of times there were situations at Atari where, when we were owned by Time Warner would say, we have a movie license, here's the contract, you do it. And the contract you look at says, what do you mean? Like a Batman, but I can't do this, can't do that, and can't do this, can't do that with a Batman, and it's like, or Superman was another case. It's like you couldn't do this, couldn't do that. It's like, well, I can't make a game out of this then. You've restricted me so much that I can't make a game out of it.
Speaking of the movie license thing, and games based on other things, not games being written as games, but games being tied in, or like Ocean did a lot of movie tie-in games, and most people on the show would definitely agree that Ocean messed up a lot. Do you feel that, is it possible to make a great game that has to be so tightly coupled with something else?
I mean, there've been good licensed games come from movies. Unfortunately, and you'll have to take a look at the current marketing trend is going more this way, even on any platform, is you get a license, to simply get name recognition. People say, Lord of the Rings, I know what Lord of the Rings is, I know what to expect, therefore it must be a good game. The movie is good, therefore the game's got to be good.
Right.
And so they'll often buy it for that reason, or they'll get shelf space for that reason, or the retailer will take it for that reason. It doesn't necessarily reflect on the game. So you get situations where people do really good games, no license, and people do schlock games with a license, and the schlock games with a license do better. These guys will never see the light of day.
They never get shelf space
in a store, and so they'll never get any releases. So the story is becoming more and more: what license can you get?
And now, have you been involved with a lot of licensing games?
I've been involved in the licensing process, and I've rejected most of them.
Good for you.
I mean, Last Starfighter at Atari, I looked at that movie. The preliminary, this was no music and no final. It was still blue screen basically.
Right.
And it was clear to me that the movie was not going to do well, and I did not want to have a game associated with it because the game was not. The game could be great, but the movie's negative connotation would certainly carry over to the game.
Right.
There was a flying game called The Bell. I looked at that and I said, movie script, there's no game here. This is all drama.
Right.
So I handed it back. The Last Action Hero, I reviewed the script for that and decided I was going to take a pass on this.
Somebody did it, though, and it was bad.
Well, despite the fact that, it had Schwarzenegger, I said, this has got to be a good movie, but, I still don't, it doesn't work. I can't make it a video game. I've mentioned already Superman license. It had so many bad restrictions on it, you could not make a game from. Batman was another situation. It was after the movie. It was going to be so far after the movie and so on, like that. And you really need to be relatively close to the movie release to be of help.
What kind of restrictions did you have?
What's that?
On the Superman and the Batman? What kind of restrictions did you have?
I don't remember all the details, and I'm sure I'm getting them confused between the two. But there was things like you couldn't have Robin. This would be an example. You couldn't have Robin. You couldn't have two Batmans. So you couldn't do a two-player game. And in the credit business, without a two-player game, it's like, it goes half your earnings.
Right.
So, you're really killing your market. These are classic situations. You couldn't kill Superman.
Right,
so there's no deaths.
So how do you make a game where he doesn't die?
Yeah, it's like,
That's crazy.
These kind of restrictions.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that as a modern developer, do you think that there's a chance we can backpedal? Because, let's be honest, everything is franchised and licensed now. If it's not a sequel, it's a license these days. If you want shelf space, if you want to be in the stores, is there a way that we can recover from that? Because I'm not necessarily thinking it's a good thing. How are you as moving forward? So you moved to cell phones.
Yes,
that's
and
where
I'm suffering the same problem.
Even in the 2D smaller market like that.
Well, that's not a good analogy. Let me explain.
Please.
Last year, you could have picked up the new color phones just came out.
Right.
First time really color phones of a screen size that wasn't 60, that you couldn't write more than 3 lines of text on.
Right.
So that you could do enough graphics to actually display something. It's pretty small. Controls are very similar to arcade, so you could do classic arcade games. This year, if you go out and buy a new phone now, it probably has 176 by 220 as opposed to 120 by 140 or 120 by 128 last year. So you get almost twice the real estate size. The phones are 35 times faster. Next year, you're talking about a phone that's 640 by 480, 4 megapixel camera, 32 megs of memory, MP3 player,
right.
An ATI custom chip for 3D at 4 megapixels per second, with a 1 gigahertz secondary processor built in, and it's like, okay, I've gone from basically a Nintendo Entertainment System to a PlayStation 1, well, actually, next year it'll be halfway between PlayStation and PlayStation 2. So this year I've got something that's, more or less, arcade quality, right now are just beginning to be arcade quality type stuff. And the software in the cell phones is so bad. It's obviously a hardware design for phones. It's not intended for games at all. For example, if you want to draw to the screen, everything is a 1 by pixel software copy. There's generally every hardware is done since 1970s, whatever, is a hardware blit, where it's physically DMA'd for you.
Right.
But these are software, I'll copy a pixel if it's the right thing. There's no blending, there's no nothing right now. It's really pathetically slow. That'll change next year. But so right now, you basically, the operating system takes 30% of your overhead. Your drawing takes 60, 70%. You've got 5% of the gameplay. That's all you're going to get. The rest of it is all stolen away from you. And every phone is sort of broken in some fashion or other. So it's like 1 year going from an NES to PlayStation 2 next year.
That has to be totally frustrating.
No, it's actually a wonderful engineering challenge. You can't. Well, I mean, there's certain things you can't do. You can't build up a long library and learn a lot of stuff. It's basically firefighting every year. You've got a brand new phone.
Does that appeal to you? Is that? I mean, I couldn't imagine programming for cell phones. That'd drive me crazy.
It'd be like it's like programming on the old VCS. It was a challenge. Yes,
I can understand
you'd
that.
have to sort of lock yourself in a closet afterwards and take medication for a while.
But what happens? Let me ask you this: while we're on the topic, you equate them to like the old VCS, and now we're going to have PlayStation 2 next year.
Yeah.
Wasn't part of the appeal of programming back in those days? I mean, I dabbled in coding, Commodore 64, VIC-20 style. I mean, that's only as far back as I go. But part of the challenge is doing something you shouldn't be able to do in a smaller space that you shouldn't be able to do it in. But now it's just like, if you need more RAM, up the system requirements. If you need more video card, wait 2 months.
Yeah. And my response to that is, I would have liked to have given every programmer at Microsoft, right now, I'd give them a 300 megahertz P1, and I want to make Microsoft, every piece of Microsoft software run blazingly fast on that. And the problem is they don't. They're running 3 gigahertz processors with 3 gig of memory or whatever, and it's like, no, I'm going to give you 100 meg of memory, and you got 300 megahertz P1, and I want it blazing fast.
I say that they should, when they teach the MCSE classes, that for 1 week, throw them on the 486 and make them write code.
Make them understand what it was like.
No, they have to understand what everybody else is still running. So when they release XP, it's like, I'm not going to buy XP because I'd have to buy a new PC because it would slow down to be so bad, that I can't tolerate it.
Let me ask you, now we're getting my favorite point of contention.
I diverged a little bit, but let me go back to answer your question.
Please.
And that is, there are different challenges. For example, I'm going to pull a game that I did, Steel Talons.
Right.
This was a hard drive and hardware, and I wanted to do a flight simulator with fogging and atmospheric effects. And I was told by the team that no, you couldn't do that. And I said, yes, I can. And I can make it really spiffy if you change the microcode in your math box to do this. And they said, no, you can't do that. So I went ahead and did it. I put fog in, and the engineers still come over and like, how in the hell did you do that? And you have to understand, this is polygon hardware where I can do 350 polygons. This is total polygons, per frame.
That's not a lot. Just for people listening, that's not a lot.
No, nowadays they do 250,000 per character.
Right.
This is 350 per frame, 60 hertz frame. So, the helicopter probably has 20 polys in it. The mountain has 6 polys in it. That kind of stuff. So that gives you some idea of what's done. And, I actually did fogging effects, and I actually got a patent for it, too.
That's cool. I did not know that.
But the engineers over there were still fabulous. They come in like, how in the hell did you do that? And I explained it to them. I said, I told you how you could do it.
That's going to complete part 1 of the Ed Logg interview. Tune in next month when we'll finish up this great interview with a great guy in classic gaming, Mr. Ed Logg. It's time for another segment of our Pinball Parlor. Bryan and I sat down and took a look at the pinball machine Terminator 3, a.k.a. Shoot Here and Here, from Stern Pinball. We always have a good time when we get together and do these little dual reviews. I hope you'll enjoy it. This month we're going to take another look at another pinball machine, Terminator 3 from Stern. It's one of their more recent pinballs, just before Simpsons, I think, right? Or was it right after that?
Dude, Simpsons is the latest. Lord of the Rings was... I don't know if Terminator 3 was before Lord of the Rings, or what.
It's somewhere in there.
Or Roller Coaster Tycoon is in there somewhere.
Yeah, they were just pumping them out left and right for a while. Anyway, Terminator 3 is yet another of the Stern family pinballs as of late. Feels very similar in design to many of the other Stern pinballs that have been out there lately.
Or just crappy feeling cheap material, I don't know.
Yeah, it does kind of have that Stern cheap feeling material, but overall, we took a look at it, went down to Castles and Coasters, which of course is the Phoenix place to play pinball, since that's pretty much the only place that has any pinball.
You gonna Doug Stig at GameWorks?
Oh, GameWorks has like two. They got what? 2 machines.
They have X-Files and Star Wars, and they haven't worked since I first came down here.
Which was like 3 or 4 years ago, and they still don't work. They had Monopoly, right? And that didn't work.
Oh, they had High Roller Casino.
High Roller Casino, and that didn't work. So, yeah. So we go to Castle and Coasters, and normally their machines are in pretty good repair. This time around, they were not as in good repair.
They're in classic Stern shape.
Classic Stern condition. Yeah, we're not bad-mouthing Stern or anything.
Oh,
but,
no, never.
No, never. Terminator 3 is one of these standard theme type games. Lots of digitized audio, lots of backglass animations. At first look, the playfield seemed fairly sparse with lots and lots of ramps, lots of rails, that sort of thing. And at first look, it doesn't look like it'd be all that gripping of a game. One of the first things you notice right off the cuff is the RPG, the rocket-propelled grenade. What do they call that? Backglass game? Is that what they call that? Backglass?
Upper playfield.
Upper playfield type thing. Basically, in the backglass is what was that? Wasn't there like a pinball called Fast Shot or Quick Shot or something like that? A basketball game that had something similar to that?
NBA Shootout.
NBA Shootout. Something like that, yeah. Anyway, Terminator 3 has an RPG that you control by using the ball launcher. It looks like a pistol grip.
Like from Terminator 2.
Like from Terminator 2. There's actually a lot of Terminator 2 in this pinball. A lot more than you could originally see. But anyway, this RPG, this is probably the most delineating factor of the pinball. You can have, I think, what is it? What did we decide it was? Like 30 seconds, I think, to shoot all the targets. There's a rotating barrel that shoots like a ping pong ball.
Well, there's a countdown. There's a the
bonus
chord
countdown, yeah.
counts out from 10 million to 1 million, and you have to shoot all the little targets, whatever those censored light arrow pointing thingies. You have to shoot them all before the thing gets down to 1 million.
Right, and then you have like a couple of seconds while it's 1 million to finish it off.
Yeah.
And I think Bryan got it once in 1 million, and I didn't get it at all this time we played. The time before we played, I did.
Yeah, you got it early. Too.
I was getting it early. Got a lot of pointage on that. But that's one of the bonus features. You can also get that on ball launch. They have sort of like Star Trek Next Generation does, where you actually have like a launch bonus. You can pick one. It kind of goes across the screen, and then when you shoot, you get that particular bonus right away. Right away, you get that bonus. So the RPG, it's all random. Sometimes you get the RPG, sometimes you get the TX 1000 bonus, blah, blah, blah. Same idea. Anyway, most of the games revolves around, it seems to be combination of ramps. There is the infamous lock ball in the drainage position where when you shoot the ball up, if you don't shoot it hard enough, it just goes right down the drain when the ball lock is opened. What else about the playfield? It plays, like I said, very similar to Terminator 2 when you secure the command center, secure the security center, through different combinations of ramps, shoots.
There's 3 ramps.
There's 3 ramps, a lot of rails. The upper right ball lock was very, very temperamental on the machine that we played. In fact, the system would have to go through a ball reset, basically, to kick that ball out of there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a real bummer. You almost didn't ever want to shoot it up the left-hand side where it did the lock, or every time you shot the ball, to launch the ball, it got stuck up there. Not a lot of moving parts in this one, in terms of things that move around the play field, things that shift around. Very straightforward in that respect.
Did that Arnie head move?
I never saw the Arnie head move. I think he just had lights on it.
Yeah.
We played probably, 4 or 5 games of that. And
that was because we kept winning free games.
Kept winning free games. Yeah, the machines are set pretty light down there, I think. Overall, though, it's an enjoyable game. The way they have the lighting set up, the lights are sequenced well. They've got like sirens. They glow and spin, things like that. It's overall it's a lot of fun. It doesn't really tie well into the game to the movie though.
No, it does. It has nothing really.
It really doesn't feel a lot like the movie. It's not like they took specific scenes from the movie and had you recreate them on the playfield like a lot of the themed pinballs do. So that was kind of different. Like I said, it played a lot more like Terminator 2, which didn't really play anything like Terminator 2 the movie either. The game does have the atmospherics that are important to any kind of themed pinball. You got lots of Arnie's voice.
Love the Arnie voice.
Love the Arnie voice. Kickback and RPG light up very easily. You know what I think I like the most about Terminator 3 is the playfield is almost simplistic in design, and there's never really a question of what am I supposed to do. How do I like the RPG? Well, there's 3 momentary touch targets that light up as you hit them that say RPG. You want to light the kickback, then there's 3 touch areas that you use to light the kickback. You know, it's when they tell you, I mean, he comes right up when you first start the game. It's like, you know, shoot here, and they light up and they tell you what to do.
You didn't do it right. Do the Arnold voice.
Shoot here and here.
Shoot everything. I like
Shoot
that one.
everything. Yeah, that was pretty cool. There's one of the bonuses, which I think is the TX bonus, that you get X amount of points for everything. I mean, anything that you hit on the screen scores you something.
It's good. It's for 5 seconds. And
yeah.
5, 4,
3,
3, 2.
Yeah, that was cool. I like that. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, Arnie's voice is the only voice you hear throughout the whole machine.
That's right. I don't think you hear. There's a couple other voices, like when you change players.
Oh yeah, the lady.
The lady's like, I like this player or something like that, which I thought was kind of kooky ass, but.
You know what you didn't see after you left and nobody was playing the machine? A kid walked by and pressed the gun, shot the gun.
Yeah.
Put the money into this machine.
No way.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have heard that. That's what put money.
No, it said, give me your money. That's what it said.
Money.
Give me your money.
Black Knight style. Give me your money. Anyway, overall an enjoyable table. We played it over and over again. It wasn't one of those machines that we abandoned our credits because we were sick and tired of playing it or we didn't like it. So that's a good thing. Overall, durability in terms of construction, there didn't seem to be a lot that could go wrong other than the standard,
sensors.
The sensor problem with the ball. But I think that's pretty much reminiscent of any game. But unlike Lord of the Rings, which we'll review on another show, which had pretty much tons and tons of possible things that could go wrong with it that would need a constant adjustment, I would think. This seemed to be pretty solid. This would be a table that I would actually consider owning.
Oh yeah, I'd probably buy this.
I'd own a Terminator 3, which is a good thing because I'm pretty picky about what I would suck up a bunch of room for in my room in terms of space. What other notes we got on that? If you'll stop being on IRC long enough. Can't believe this. We're sitting here recording the show and you're chatting on IRC.
That's about it.
Is that all we had for Terminator 3?
Yeah. You said the theme is well done. The audio is rich. The audio.
Lord, you've been served.
I've been served. Rich and non-annoying. Lots of ramps and combos and missions.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's sort of one of those pinball machines that I think even a novice could walk up to. Somebody
it's a good beginner's pinball.
It's a good beginner pin, and I think that there's a lot of depth in terms of the missions and whatnot that you could get into as a seasoned pinball player that would make it enjoyable for everybody. There's a lot of pins that are just not made for people who don't know pinball real well. And this was not one of them, so I appreciated that. Anything you'd like to add? I think that'll about wrap up Terminator 3.
That's good enough for me.
That works for me.
Yep.
Look for more of our pinball segments in future shows.
Woo!
All right.
Don't ask me why I did that, but I just had to do that.
This month we're going to look at the shareware title Crimsonland, developed by 10 Tons, distributed by Reflexive Arcade, reflexive.net. Just to give you kind of an overview, there's a good side story behind this game. A good friend of mine said, we were talking in passing about video games and how there just wasn't much for me to play lately. And he was asking me, how far along I was in Crimsonland. Like I had already known about the title, I've been playing it forever. And I told him, I said, well, Crimsonland, I've never even heard of it. And he's like, just starts gushing. Oh, dude, this is it. This is the game. This is the answer to all of your prayers. Built it up pretty good and said, this is it. You want to get in on this. So I went ahead and I took a look at the game's official site. And I started reading about it. And I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs here from their news release. As battles wage against the never-ending hordes, players are rewarded with new weapons and features. Crimsonland features an arsenal of 40 perks, which are like special skills, and 15-plus weapons, including machine guns, rocket launchers, flamethrowers, and plasma guns. The game also has 3 exciting modes: Quest, Rush, and Survival. In Quest modes, the players can level up by overcoming a set of monsters. each new level introducing new weapons, perks, and power-ups. Players will need to keep on their toes as each new level will spawn more challenging and increasing number of enemies. Rush mode is a fairly simple, highly addicting, this is their words, not mine, concept. Fight off hordes of monsters and survive as long as you possibly can. Survival mode is a mixture of both quest and rush modes. As you eliminate monsters, you gain experience points that allow you to obtain perks. The longer you manage to stay alive, the more experience that you get. The basic concept here is they throw you on the screen and aliens pounce you. I mean, I wish I could say that there was more to the game, but that's pretty much it. Now, you do encounter things such as monster generators, sort of like Gauntlet, where you got to blow the generators up to keep the aliens from coming out. It's pure Twitch gaming. I mean, there's not a storyline to follow. You drop yourself in the game, you play, you go away. That's pretty much it. Lots of gore, lots of bloodfest, which I do believe you can turn off. And that's pretty much it. The game relies more or less on the variance of weapons and the variance of perks. And the game has undergone a couple of fairly decent revisions as of late. So the game has been supported and new stuff has been added. Now, when I first started looking at the screenshots and I first started hearing about the game, I thought to myself, well, this is Robotron. This is that new version of Robotron that I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for. This was going to be my 2004 Twitch game. So I went ahead and downloaded it and I fired it up. The first thing you'll notice right off the bat is the control system. And in an otherwise perfect game, this control system will make you not want to play this title. And while they allow you to define your controls, it's the control system inherently that's the problem. Not so much how you control the control system, but the control system itself. Let me give you an example. You run around independently with your arrow keys, right? Or whatever keys you decide you want. You then use the mouse to aim and shoot. Okay, so you've got that independent fire control like you're thinking, oh, that's Robotron. The problem is, there's never a time, and I played this for a couple hours at least, there was never a time when I got comfortable with this control mechanism. So I went in and thought, if I could turn this into Robotron, if I could go into the settings and flip-flop this into Robotron mode where I could fire, using 4 directions, 8 directions, whatever, and move the same way without the mouse, I thought, this game could be saved. Well, the problem is the game is written around this control methodology of move and aim and shoot, unfortunately. So I wrestled with the control system for quite a while, played many, many levels of the game, and I was enjoying the shoot fest, but the controls continued to get in the way. I finally got to the point to where I stopped playing because this game, I could not overcome the controls. You ever had a game like that where the game figuratively should stomp major ass, but the controls totally turn you off? It's like that. There's never a time when you get the hang of it, or at least I didn't. But everything else, I could recommend the game every other way. It looks good. It sounds good. It's very slick and professionally put together. These guys know what they're doing. It's everything about it's cool. The ramping up system, the perks, some of the perks are cool. You can get things like, what are some of them? I'm trying to think now. It's been a while since I've been playing it. But you can get things like telekinesis, where you can move your pointer over an object that's all the way on the other side of the screen and pick it up, like a different power-up. And you can get, of course, the different weapon types. Some of the weapons work better long range, some work better short range. So there's a small amount of strategy involved. The other thing, too, that I noticed, even though I played through the tutorial, for some reason it didn't click on me how to activate your perks. In the middle of playing the game, you'll get to a point where you're allowed to enable perks, but you don't get like a big flashing notice or something that says, hey, activate perks now. Maybe there was a sound or something that I missed. But you basically right-click on while you're playing, and it'll pull up this perk menu. It freezes the action and pulls up this perk menu, and you can choose from a set of 5 possible perks for that particular moment. Some of them does more damage, resists more damage, dodges better. Sort of like almost like a little role-playing action to it. And, and while I'm telling you this, the more I talk about it, it's like, God, what a great game. But it's held back by its control system. And as much as I'd like to play it, I can't get past the control system. And I think a lot of you, I'd be curious to see what everybody else thinks. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I can't get the groove down with that particular control system. I'd be curious what other people think. But if the game sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend at least going and picking up the downloadable demo. See if you can get past the controls. Me personally, I would take a slightly scaled down version where the perks were a little more limited. Like you can't use telekinesis if you were in a Robotron scenario because telekinesis requires that you mouse over the item and click it to pick it up. So you'd have to modify the game a little bit to slap in a Robotron mode. But if they would make a Robotron mode for this, I'd be all over it. I could totally recommend the title. But at this point in time, it looks like development's kind of ceased off on it, and maybe that's not a possibility. But like I said, otherwise this game has got the gore, it's got the action, it's got all the cool little perks and power-ups and all the weaponry. It's got a solid base, but the control system really holds it back. Still, it's worth checking out. It's not a waste of your time, at least to see if you can adapt to the control system. I'm sure somebody likes it, otherwise it wouldn't have been in the game. But me personally, I could not get into it. Again, this was Crimsonland from 10 Tons, developed by 10 Tons, distributed by Reflexive, and we'll, of course, as always, provide a link for you to pick that up. You can buy the game within the product, if I remember right. There's all sorts of other little perks that they've thrown into the interface that you can do. So, like I said, the guys did a good job. So I would definitely recommend that you check it out. See if the game fits your needs, and if you can get through the control system, then I recommend that you pick it up and buy it. Good stuff. This month we're going to look at the commercial title Atari Anthology by So-Called Atari. This is yet another attempt to bring the classic gaming experience home on consoles such as PlayStation 2, Xbox, etc., etc. Once again, we are plagued by the concept of how well do they get these games running under disparate hardware. Now, the Atari Anthology package, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is pretty much the same package that got released on the PC, must have been, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, something like that. We're looking at the PlayStation 2 version, of course. So if you have an Xbox, your results may vary. Basically, we're looking at 85 games. Of course, all Atari licenses. Of those 85 games, we'll break these down for you. 18 of them are classic arcade games, like Asteroids, Battlezone, Centipede, Missile Command, Tempest, Warlords, Pong, and Crystal Castles. There are 5 bonus games that are included, including Steeplechase, Off the Wall, Blackjack, Desert Falcon, and Sprint Master. There are 62 Atari 2600 favorites, such as Adventure, Circus Atari, Millipede, Outlaw, Breakout, Gravatar, Submarine Commander, Sword Quest, Yar's Revenge, Dodge, Maze Crazy, Space War, Slot Racers, Quadrun, and many more. They also have alternative play modes for most of these games, where they will sort of alter the original game to give you a time mode or a weird mode where the graphics freak out, things like that. So there's a couple of different twists on that. Now we're going to look primarily at one or two, we'll look at more than one or two, but we'll look at a handful of titles in this package. Because a lot of this stuff we've seen before. And again, usually when we play these anthologies, these game packs, these treasure collections, the biggest problem is sound. Most people, we don't care about sound. Well, heaven forbid I happen to be a discriminate kind of guy. So I am very much interested in how sound in emulation works out on these collections. For me, if I can't play it the way I remember it, I don't want to play it at all. And yes, I know there's always MAME, and yes, I know I have a white box, and yes, I know I could be playing Robotron in MAME, but you know what? It's my responsibility to look at some of these titles, It's my responsibility to see how classic gaming is being violated in modern times. So how does the Atari Anthology stack up? Let's take a peek right now at the arcade set. Now, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the interface. Now, most people are probably going to say, oh, well, I bet Shane doesn't like the interface because it's weird. Okay, I almost like the interface. If they would have broken the games up by system, 2600, arcade, etc., I would have been a little happier. But instead, they decided to break them up by genre. Space games, racing games, mind games, action games, arcade at home, things like that. And you're never exactly sure where the thing you're looking for is going to be. After playing with the title for a while, you realize that there is one section actually called Arcade Originals. Now, pretty much all the arcade games are in there. But you may not initially figure that out. So you may be thinking, oh, adventure games. Okay, well, that action games, that's going to be Centipede or whatever. And you go into action games, and you get something different. You see things like air-sea battling, combat, and dodge 'em, and radar lock, and submarine commander. The basic rule of thumb here is if it's not in the arcade slot, right, if it doesn't say Arcade Originals, then everything else is 2600 titles. Once you know that, the interface pisses you off a little less. But the interface is kind of interesting. I want to talk about it for a minute because, like I said, I do kind of like it other than the fact that I thought that they could have divvied it up differently. It all takes place in space. Basically, you fly away from the Earth, and all of these different areas are constellations that you can highlight. And then when you highlight them, they kind of glow in so that you can see what you're looking at. And then when you click on, say, Arcade Originals, you fly through space again, and you find yourself in a big constellation. And then from there, it's got the games listed side by side, so you can just pop through the list and look at them. Now, because most people are interested in arcade games, I'm going to run through the entire list here of what the arcade games are. Asteroids, Asteroids Deluxe, Battlezone, Black Widow, Centipede, Crystal Castles, Gravitar, Liberator, Lunar Lander, Major Havoc, Millipede, Missile Command, Pong, Red Baron, Space Duel, Super Breakout, Tempest, and Warlords. Okay, that's what you get for arcade games. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, whoa, Black Widow. Man, we haven't seen that forever. Major Havoc. We haven't seen that forever. And then you start thinking about it, you're going, let's see, Black Widow, Asteroids, Gravitar, Lunar Lander, Space Duel, Tempest, Red Baron. You're starting to see a pattern here? A greater portion of these games are vector games. When I say vector games, I'm talking not raster games. Vectors being the line-drawn games that you see, like Tempest. It's all created by brilliant lines, right? The other games, like Crystal Castles, or what else is in here? Pong, or Super Breakout. Those are raster games. But for the most part, if you look at this, the count in here is pretty much vector games. Now, there's a double-edged sword to that. You're going, well, yeah, but they don't release vector games that often. I mean, okay, you've seen a million Asteroids, but Black Widow, Major Havoc, we haven't seen these released yet. So it's like, in one hand, you're saying, well, we get these new games, and then you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, though. The problem is that they're vector games. Now, if you know anything about arcade hardware, you know that vector games required a special high-resolution monitor to look really good in the arcade. Unfortunately, they were very expensive, and they went down a lot. Ask anybody who owns a Tempest. The problem with vector games at home is that we are not playing them on high-resolution monitors. We're playing them on televisions. Now, if you've ever had the opportunity to look at a vector game on basically a raster screen, there's a lot to be desired. And so while you're thinking, oh, Major Havoc, that's great, or Black Widow, that's great, you also have to understand that these games are in low-resolution simulated vectors, which means they do not look nearly as crisp or as bright as they would have appeared in the arcade or in MAME on a PC monitor, because they do things like translucencies and things like that in MAME to make the effect look right. So you're looking at all these games going, hey, I got all these cool games, but damn it, 3/4 of them are vector games. That's great on the PC. They look fine on the PC version. But on their TV screen, leaves a little bit to be desired. Now you also go through this game list and you say to yourself, what else is funny about this game list? Let me just read you some titles, see if you can figure it out. Let me see here. Let me pull up to the beginning here. Centipede, Crystal Castles, Major Havoc, Millipede, Missile Command, Space Duel, Super Breakout, Tempest. You seeing a pattern here? These are all analog games. The controls are analog. Spinners, roller balls, right? These are all what I would consider custom arcade controls, all right? You know playing Crystal Castles with a joystick is absolutely not the same thing as playing it with a roller ball. You know playing Missile Command is simply not the same game, playing it even with an analog controller, as it is to play with a roller ball. So I'm looking through this list going, oh my God, most of these games are alternative controller type games. Sure, some of them work out okay with the analog controller, but you just can't spin the Tempest controller like you could at the arcade, right? And Major Havoc had the side-to-side roller. Well, that's pretty hard to simulate at home, too. So not only are you seeing these games lesser than they were, you're also playing them in a method that is counterproductive to the original game. This does not give me the arcade at home experience here, folks. We chose games that were not only inappropriate for the medium that they're being played on, but also with the controllers you're playing it with. All right? That's kind of a downer. If you look at this list of arcade games, you're thinking, oh man, I got Black Widow finally. Yeah, I got Major Havoc. I finally got these games. And there's just something wrong. Now, let me tell you what's really disappointing. Okay, let's say that you can forget all that. Okay. It's good enough on my TV screen. I can get used to the controls. What about the emulation? Now, I don't know who is smoking crack at Digital Eclipse, but I continue to find this over and over again. Midway, who also hired Digital Eclipse to do their freaking emulation. Somebody at Digital Eclipse needs to play the original games, or at least play them on MAME. Because if you go into Black Widow, which happens to be one of my favorite of the Robotron family, next to Robotron, Black Widow runs at, say, let me see if I can give you a rough estimate. That's how many times faster the Black Widow runs than it should. Let's see here. Let me see if I can give you. It probably runs about 4 or 5 times too fast, which makes the game absolutely unplayable, even with the dual joysticks. I want to know who at Digital Eclipse said, oh, well, this is good. I want to know who over at Atari said, oh, this is good. And it's not just limited to Black Widow, folks. Major Havoc runs about 2 times too fast. So you got to ask yourself, where's the quality control on this stuff? It's not so much a matter of it's not frame accurate. Black Widow's unplayable, period. It's just like Wizard of War on the Midway arcade treasures. It could not possibly have gone through any sort of quality assurance in order for this to pass muster. Okay? So, once again, we're back to the same problem. We can't emulate these things right. We're not even choosing the right games for the medium. All right? It's irresponsible. And it pisses me off. Fortunately, I got this in a bargain bin. So what about, okay, let's say that we don't look at the Atari 2600 deal. Let's take a look instead at, say, some of the 2600 games. Instead of looking at the arcade games, let's look at the 2600 games. We'll look at a tried and true Adventure. Adventure's a good tried and true game, right? So how does that work out? How does that look? Well, I can tell you that they pretty much got the 2600 stuff figured out. I was just kind of playing this for just a second to see if there's anything came to mind. I looked at this for last month's show, but it didn't get on there. I poked through a handful of the 2600 titles. Everything seems to be pretty spot on. The emulation actually seems to be the right speed. It appears to be, the sound appears to be right. So if you're looking for 2600 titles, which actually play okay with the joystick, then this might be the package for you, finally, after all this time, to have an emulation system that you can play some of this good stuff. Now, there are, of course, little bits of extras floating around. There's bonus material that you can look at. And the bonus material is done on a per unit basis. Most of the time it has to do with manuals, things like that. You can zoom in and out. It's stuff that you've become accustomed to. You can look inside and outside of manuals. You can pan through looking at the cartridges, things like that. For the most part, you're not going to find a lot of great stuff in here. It's pretty straightforward. Manual scans, box scans. I don't know if I'd really call that a lot of bonus, but, maybe people find value in that. Me personally, I'm a little less than finding value in that. The bonus material is also put in a very piss-poor interface. In other words, if you were, say, on the main screen and you went to arcade games and you selected bonus, you would have to arrow around. It doesn't give you a list to scroll through. You have to sit there and go left, left, right, 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 right to pan through and see what it is that you want. Most of it's manuals, but you do get an occasional movie. It's most of the same kind of stuff that we've seen before. I won't really get into the depths of that. But basically, bonus material on these games appears to all be the same, subpar. Now, let me tell you what is probably the best thing about. I don't want to knock the title completely. If you're into 2600 titles, by all means, pick this up in the bargain bin. If you're looking for arcade translations that look clean on your machine, that play good with realistic controllers, this isn't going to be your title. If you're picky, like me, you're going to be unhappy. Now, again, maybe the Xbox version's not like that. At least the emulation itself, other than the fact that Black Widow runs 17 million times too fast, and Major Havoc does, and I'm sure I could find others if I played around long enough. Aside from that, I guess that's enough, right? There are a couple of things that are neat about this package that I will not be irresponsible and not report to you. You can turn on and off bezel art and control panels. Now, I still haven't seen a game yet that makes actual hands pop up on the control panel to emulate what you do on the panel with what you do on the joystick. If somebody did that, I'd just lose my freaking mind. It's goofy and it's worthless, but it'd be cool, at least. It'd be better than these old rehashed Nolan Bushnell videos that we see over and over again, right? But it's kind of fun to be able to put the panel art on. You can see what the actual bezel looks like and the control panel. That's pretty cool. You can also zoom the game in and out one level, which even in the vector games does not help. But I will tell you that I was very impressed, of all things, with Battlezone. If you're looking for a way to play Battlezone, if Battlezone happens to be what rubs your nub, then this is your package. Because Battlezone, with the PlayStation 2 DualShock controller, with a thumb on each analog control, is absolutely the best version of Battlezone I've yet to play. It's emulated right, the sounds are right, the play is right, the controls are right. Okay, it's vector. And it looks a little milky on the screen. Even on my Sony Wega, it still looks a little milky. But I'll tell you what, in terms of play, this is the best you're going to get, folks. Sans playing the actual game and putting your head inside the little viewfinder. So that's the highlight of the game package, if you can believe it. Overall, what would I say? I would say 2600 lovers that really want to get a whole bunch, 60-something games for the 2600, I would definitely pick it up. Sight unseen, this is going to work for you. If you are looking for the arcade games that are in this package, I would suggest you rent or borrow or not go that direction at all. If you really want to play arcade classic games, I'm telling you, the only real way to do it, and I hate to say it, the only real way to do it is to use MAME, and get a controller that's befitting of the games you want to play. You're not going to play Robotron with a keyboard. You're not going to play Robotron with a wireless mouse. You're going to play Robotron or Cloak and Dagger with a double joystick controller. You're going to have to kneel and bow and scrape and get what the game requires, if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for casual, gee, I remember that game, that was fun, play it for 20 minutes and shut it off, these Twitch packs are probably just perfect for you. I happen to have a little higher level of interest in these games other than the occasional throw it in, remember my childhood for 20 minutes and shut them off. I am a connoisseur of classic video games. A lot of people that listen to this show are connoisseurs of classic video games. They're being mauled in these packages. Literally mauled, at least in the PlayStation 2. You know, I'm not even going to start slamming on Xbox because I do enough of that. But I'm saying that these are really half-ass attempts. There is no excuse for Black Widow. There was no excuse for Wizard of War on the Midway packs. None. There's no excuse. There are ways of slowing code down. Trust me, I know. I develop code too. It's always easier to slow it down than to speed it up. Okay? So, my recommendation is give it a rental if you can find it locally. If not, borrow it from somebody. If you're a big 2600 person, you can pick it up sight unseen. You'll be happy with it. Looking for arcade stuff? There are better avenues to take. You should check out other alternatives. If you're an Xbox person, rent it or borrow it. If the Midway packages apparently were perfect on Xbox. So apparently Digital Eclipse can program a PC, but they can't program an Xbox. Or I'm sorry, the Xbox is a PC. What am I saying? They can program a PC. They can program for DirectX, but they cannot program for the PlayStation 2. They can get close, and close might be good enough for you, but close was not good enough for me. Atari Anthology, Hasbro, Slant, Atari, Slant, Infogrames, Slant, whoever the hell owns them today. You can probably pick it up anywhere. It'll probably already be in the bargain bin. Atari Anthology for the PlayStation 2. Well, the beginning of a new year has begun and another show has ended. I wanted to take just a few moments here at the end of the show here to talk, just give a little credit to the many people that make this show happen. Since we've put up the new contribution system, which, by the way, really helps us out with the show in more ways than one, we've had a lot of people submit. A lot of people have helped out. I just wanted to name some of the names that have popped into my mind here as of late as I poke through our reference database here. Dana Eiler, Gary Corcoran, Julian Lunn, Jason Callahan, Baby Doggin, Gareth Kennerly, James Parker, Christian Egler, and Alex Santos. And there are many more people who have contributed over the years to make this show work out. Speedhost.com, we always like to mention them. The good folks at Digital Leisure who are always trying to help us out and sending us stuff, donating prizes. The folks over at Don Bluth and Company, Don Bluth Films. You know, they've given us prizes in the past. Everyone's been so nice. It's so great. We've had so many great people. All the people that we've interviewed, you know, the David Cranes and the Alan Millers and, you know, our good friend Paul Norman from former Cosme days. There have just been so many people over the last few years that have really made a difference in the show. Some people like Don Bluth and Paul Norman have been actually the inspiration for this show. You know, it's funny, a lot of people, if you've never listened to the older shows, I hate always repeating myself, but so many people don't have the older discs and they don't understand a lot of this stuff. I started Retro Radio to begin with, not only to have some place to vent, but my goal with RetroGaming Radio was to meet Don Bluth. I figured if you could epitomize one person in classic gaming history for me, it would be Don Bluth, the maker of Dragon's Lair, the animator of Dragon's Lair that, you know, impacted me so much as a child. You know, the Paul Normans, the Craig Chamberlains, the Jim Socks, all of these people had such a huge influence on my life that you can't even, you have to walk up and shake their hand and go, thank you. You know, we've managed to do that. I've managed to meet almost all my heroes. I've managed to do exactly what I wanted to do with Retro Gaming Radio. It's just like when you work a second job to pay off a bill. Once the bill's over, everything else is just gravy. You know, that's what Retro Gaming Radio is now for me, is gravy. All the good stuff I get from this point on, the people I meet, like yourselves, the fans, the interviewees, the companies, all that stuff, it's all gravy. And it's good gravy. It's that good brown homemade gravy put over the mashed potatoes. There's a river of it flowing off the side. Damn, now I'm hungry. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to get something to eat. This is Shane R. Monroe with Retro Gaming Radio saying, until next time, keep it retro.